The rain hammered against the bulletproof windows of MI6 headquarters in Vauxhall Cross, London. Inside the secure briefing room on the 9th floor, Sarah Collins stood at attention, her green eyes fixed on the legendary figure seated across the mahogany table. James Bond, the original 007, looked older than the photograph suggested, but his piercing blue eyes still held that unmistakable sharpness that had made him a legend. "You understand what you're taking on, don't you?" Bond's voice carried the weight of decades of impossible missions, narrow escapes and sacrifices that never made it into official reports. Sarah's jaw tightened. "I do, sir." Beside her, Max sat perfectly still, his intelligent brown eyes tracking every movement in the room. The Belgian Malinois had been her partner for 7 years in the Atlanta Police Department's K9 unit. Now, he wore a sleek tactical vest embedded with micro-cameras, audio sensors and communication devices that would make Q Branch proud. Bond leaned forward, his weathered hands clasped together. "Being 007 isn't about the gadgets or the guns, Collins. It's about making impossible choices in impossible situations. It's about carrying the weight of lives you save and lives you couldn't. It's about being willing to become a ghost when your country needs you to disappear." He paused, his gaze drifting to Max. "And it's about trust, absolute, unwavering trust in your partner." "Max has saved my life more times than I can count," Sarah said quietly. "I trust him with everything." A faint smile crossed Bond's face. "Good. Because where you're going, that trust is the only thing that will keep you alive." The current head of MI6, cleared her throat from the head of the table. Dame Margaret Whitmore had run the Secret Intelligence Service for 5 years, and her reputation for cold efficiency was well earned. "Agent Collins, your transition from the Atlanta PD to MI6 has been unprecedented. Your performance during the training program exceeded all expectations. Your tactical skills, linguistic abilities, and field adaptability make you an ideal candidate for the 007 designation." She slid a sealed folder across the table. "But training scenarios are controlled environments. This is your first official mission as 007, and I won't lie to you. It's baptism by fire." Sarah opened the folder. Inside were photographs of a man in his mid-40s with graying temples and nervous eyes. "Victor Petrov, alias Nightingale," she read aloud, "former weapons engineer for the Syndicate." "The Syndicate," continued, "is an international criminal organization that makes Spectre look like schoolyard bullies. They traffic in weapons, intelligence, political destabilization, and terrorism for hire." Petrov worked in their weapons development division for 8 years before his conscience finally caught up with him. Bond interjected, "I've tangled with the Syndicate twice. Lost good people both times. They're smart, well-funded, and absolutely ruthless. If Petrov is willing to turn informant, it means something big is coming." Nodded grimly. "Petrov contacted us 3 days ago through a secure channel. He claims the Syndicate is planning a major terrorist attack during the Global Leadership Summit in Atlanta next week. Every head of state from the G20 nations will be in attendance." Sarah felt her stomach tighten. Atlanta, her city, her home for the past decade. "Petrov has detailed intelligence on the operation. Target locations, timing, personnel involved, and most critically, the location of a dirty bomb that the Syndicate has smuggled into the United States." M's expression darkened. "If that device detonates in a major metropolitan area, the casualties will be catastrophic. The political and economic fallout could destabilize the entire Western alliance." "So what's the extraction plan?" Sarah asked, her mind already running through tactical scenarios. Activated the holographic display in the center of the table. A 3-dimensional rendering of Atlanta's central station materialized in the air. "Petrov will arrive at the station tomorrow at 14 hours on the northbound train from Charlotte. He'll be carrying a leather briefcase containing encrypted drives with all the intelligence data. Your objective is simple. Extract Petrov and secure the briefcase without alerting the Syndicate or local authorities." Sarah studied the hologram, noting the multiple entry points, security checkpoints, and crowds of civilians. A public extraction in broad daylight, high risk of collateral damage. Precisely why we're sending our best, Em said, her eyes meeting Sarah's. You grew up in Atlanta. You know the city, the culture, the patterns. You'll blend in better than any European agent we could send. Bond stood, buttoning his jacket. One more thing, Collins. The Syndicate has eyes everywhere. Police departments, intelligence agencies, private security firms. Trust no one outside this room. If the extraction goes sideways, you're on your own until you reach the safe house. He extended his hand. Good luck, 007. Sarah shook his hand firmly, feeling the symbolic weight of the gesture. She was no longer just Sarah Collins, ex-cop from Atlanta. She was 007, heir to a legacy of espionage that stretched back decades. As Bond left the room, M stood as well. Your flight to Atlanta leaves in 3 hours. Q Branch has prepared your equipment. Standard issue Walther PPK, encrypted communication devices, and specialized gear for Max. Your cover identity is Sarah Mitchell, freelance photographer covering human interest stories. The legend has been established and verified. Understood, ma'am. M's expression softened almost imperceptibly. Sarah, I didn't choose you for this role lightly. The 007 designation has traditionally gone to male agents with military backgrounds. Some within MI6 question my decision to break with tradition, prove them wrong. I intend to, ma'am. After M departed, Sarah knelt beside Max, running her fingers through his short fur. Looks like we're not in Kansas anymore, buddy, she whispered. Max's tail wagged once, and he pressed his head against her shoulder, their private gesture of reassurance. The next 12 hours passed in a blur of preparation. Q Branch, now headed by a brilliant young woman named Amelia Chen, outfitted Sarah with equipment that would have seemed like science fiction just a decade ago. The Walther PPK had been modified with biometric locks, ensuring only Sarah could fire it. Her smartphone contained secure communication protocols and emergency extraction codes. Even her watch concealed a miniature EMP device for disabling electronic locks. But the real marvel was Max's upgraded tactical vest. The carbon fiber shell was lightweight, but capable of stopping small-caliber rounds. Built-in cameras provided Sarah with a live feed of his perspective, and thermal sensors allowed him to detect concealed weapons or explosives. A small speaker, embedded in the collar, allowed Sarah to issue commands remotely if they were separated. "He's quite remarkable," Amelia said, watching Max calmly accept the new equipment. Most animals would be agitated by this level of sensory input. But his neural patterns show complete adaptation. The bond between you two is extraordinary. Sarah smiled. We've been through hell together. This is just another mission. Hardly just another mission, Amelia countered. You're carrying one of the most prestigious designations in intelligence work. Every enemy of Britain, and there are many, will want to test the new 007. They'll want to know if you're as good as your predecessors, if you're better, if you're vulnerable. Let them try, Sarah said quietly, her green eyes hardening. They'll learn soon enough. The flight to Atlanta was uneventful. Sarah traveled first class under her cover identity, complete with a portfolio of photography work that had been expertly fabricated by MI6's document specialists. Max traveled in a specialized climate-controlled section reserved for service animals, though his accommodations were far more comfortable than standard cargo holds. As the plane descended through the clouds, Sarah gazed out at the sprawling cityscape of Atlanta. The downtown skyline glittered in the afternoon sun, glass towers reaching toward the sky, highways threading through neighborhoods she'd patrolled as a cop. Somewhere down there, Viktor Petrov was moving toward a rendezvous that would either save thousands of lives or doom them. The safe house was located in Virginia Highland, an upscale neighborhood filled with restaurants, boutiques, and tree-lined streets. The house itself was a renovated craftsman bungalow that looked unremarkable from the outside, but contained a state-of-the-art command center in the basement. Sarah spent the evening reviewing surveillance footage of Atlanta Central Station, memorizing crowd patterns, security rotations, and emergency exit routes. Max lay beside her workstation, occasionally lifting his head when her stress levels spiked. He could read her better than any human ever could, sensing the tension in her shoulders, the slight acceleration of her breathing, the way her fingers drummed against the desk when she was working through a tactical problem. "Tomorrow's the day, Max," she said, reviewing the extraction plan for the 20th time. "Petrov arrives at 14 Traun. We identify him, make contact, and extract him to the safe house. Simple and clean." Max's ears perked up and he gave a soft chuff, his way of expressing skepticism. Sarah laughed despite the tension. "Yeah, I know. Nothing's ever simple and clean. But we're 007 now. We make it work." That night, Sarah barely slept. She kept visualizing different scenarios, running through contingency plans, identifying potential threats. What if the Syndicate had surveillance at the station? What if Petrov panicked and ran? What if there was a secondary team waiting to ambush them? The variables were endless, and each one represented potential disaster. At 06 Adradas, she gave up on sleep and went for a run through the neighborhood with Max. The familiar rhythm of footsteps on pavement, the burn in her lungs, the simplicity of physical exertion, it centered her, reminding her why she'd joined the police force in the first place. She wanted to protect people. She wanted to make a difference. Now, she had the opportunity to do that on a global scale. By noon, Sarah was dressed in casual clothes that allowed for easy movement, dark jeans, a leather jacket over a fitted t-shirt, and boots with reinforced soles. Her Walther PPK was holstered at the small of her back, concealed by the jacket. Max wore a service dog vest over his tactical gear, making him appear like a standard K9 companion rather than a mobile intelligence platform. The drive to Atlanta Central Station took 20 minutes. Sarah parked 3 blocks away in a public garage, approaching the station on foot to better assess the environment. The afternoon sun was warm, and the streets were crowded with commuters, tourists, and locals going about their daily routines. To all appearances, Sarah was just another woman walking her dog through the city, but her trained eyes were constantly scanning, categorizing threats, identifying exits and choke points. 2 men in business suits lingering near the station entrance, potential surveillance or just commuters checking their phones. A woman with a large purse sitting on a bench, innocent traveler or concealed weapons carrier. A panel van parked illegally in a loading zone, maintenance vehicle or mobile command. Center. Max's ears were forward, his body language alert but not aggressive. Through the camera feed displayed on Sarah's smart glasses, she could see his enhanced perspective. Thermal signatures highlighting concealed objects, audio pickups isolating specific conversations from the ambient noise. They entered the station at 13:45, 15 minutes before Petrov's scheduled arrival. The main concourse was a vast space filled with natural light from skylights high above. Electronic departure boards flickered with train schedules. Shops and restaurants lined the perimeter. Hundreds of people moved through the space in seemingly random patterns. But Sarah knew crowds had rhythms, flows, predictable behaviors that could be exploited or disrupted. She bought a coffee from a kiosk and found a seat with a clear view of Track 7, where Petrov's train would arrive. Max settled at her feet, his presence comforting and reassuring. To any observer, they looked like any other traveler waiting for a train. Sarah's earpiece crackled to life. 07, this is Control. Petrov's train is on schedule. ETA 4 minutes. Copy that, Control. Sarah murmured, lifting the coffee cup to her lips to mask her words. Target acquisition in 4 minutes. Her heart rate remained steady. Years of training and real-world experience had taught her to control her physiological responses to stress. But beneath the calm exterior, her mind was racing through final preparations. Once Petrov was in sight, she had perhaps 30 seconds to make contact, verify his identity, and begin the extraction before the Syndicate could react. The departure board updated. Track 7, arriving. Sarah stood, adjusting her jacket to ensure easy access to her weapon. Max rose with her, his body tense and ready. Through the smart glasses, Sarah accessed the station's security camera feeds, a back door provided by Q Branch. She could see the train pulling into the platform, could see passengers gathering their luggage and preparing to disembark. And then she saw him. Viktor Petrov, looking even more nervous than his photograph suggested, clutching a worn leather briefcase to his chest like a lifeline. He stepped onto the platform, his eyes darting nervously across the crowd. Sarah began moving toward track 7, keeping her pace casual but purposeful. Max walked beside her, his training evident in every controlled step. Petrov saw her approach, and recognition flickered in his eyes. MI6 had shown him Sarah's photograph during their initial contact. He started moving toward her, relief evident on his face. That's when Sarah saw them, 3 men moving with military precision through the crowd. Dark suits, earpieces, hands positioned near concealed weapons. They were converging on Petrov from different angles, professional and coordinated. The Syndicate had found him. Sarah's hand moved to her weapon as her mind shifted from extraction mode to combat mode. The mission had just gone from simple to catastrophically complicated. Hundreds of civilians were in the immediate vicinity. Any gunfight would result in panic, casualties, and a massive response from local police. Exactly the kind of attention MI6 wanted to avoid. But Petrov had the intelligence that could save thousands of lives. The mission couldn't fail. Sarah locked eyes with Petrov across the crowded concourse. She saw the terror in his face as he recognized the approaching threat, saw his grip tighten on the briefcase, saw him mouth a single word, help. Max sensed the shift in Sarah's tension, and his entire body coiled, ready to act on her command. Sarah spoke calmly into her comms. Control, we have a situation. 3 hostiles converging on the package. Civilian population density is critical, requesting permission to engage. The response came immediately. 07, you have authorization to secure the package by any means necessary. Minimize collateral damage. Sarah's lips curved into a grim smile. Copy that, Control. Engaging now. The first hostile was 10 feet from Petrov when Sarah moved. She closed the distance in 3 long strides, her hand shooting out to grab the man's wrist just as his hand closed around a concealed weapon. She twisted hard, using his momentum against him, and drove her elbow into his solar plexus. The man folded with a wheezing gasp, and Sarah swept his legs, sending him crashing into a luggage cart. Civilians began to notice the disturbance, voices rising in alarm. The second hostile was reaching for Petrov when Max struck. 75 pounds of trained muscle and aggression hit the man at knee height, fangs clamping onto his forearm. The man screamed, trying to shake Max off, but the dog's bite was unrelenting. Sarah grabbed Petrov by the arm. "Move! Now!" They ran toward the south exit, Max releasing the hostile and sprinting after them. Behind them, chaos erupted as the third hostile drew his weapon, no longer concerned with subtlety. The gunshot was shockingly loud in the enclosed space of the station. People screamed and scattered, dropping luggage and diving for cover. Sarah felt the bullet pass inches from her head, heard it ricochet off a steel support beam. She spun, drawing her Walther in one smooth motion, and fired twice. Both rounds hit the hostile center mass, and he went down hard, but more were coming. Sarah's enhanced vision picked out at least 4 additional hostiles entering the station, all armed, all moving with lethal intent. "Control, extraction point is compromised," Sarah said, pulling Petrov toward a service corridor. "Multiple hostiles, lethal force authorized." "Copy, 007. Safe house protocol is active. Local authorities have been notified of a terrorist threat. You have 6 minutes before Metro Police arrive in force. 6 minutes to get Petrov out of the station, through 3 blocks of city streets, and into a vehicle without getting killed by the Syndicate's hit squad. Just another day at the office for 007. Sarah kicked open the service door and pulled Petrov into the maintenance corridor beyond. Max was a blur of motion, his enhanced senses scanning for threats. The corridor was dim and narrow, lined with electrical panels and ventilation ducts. Behind them, the door burst open and two hostiles entered, weapons raised. Sarah didn't hesitate. She fired 3 rounds while moving, each shot precise and controlled. One hostile went down immediately. The second took cover behind a junction box, returning fire. "Max, flank left," Sarah commanded. The dog moved like a shadow, utilizing the low angles and scattered equipment for cover. He circled around the hostile's position while Sarah kept him pinned with suppressing fire. When Max struck, it was from the man's blind spot, powerful jaws clamping onto his gun hand. The weapon clattered to the concrete floor, and Sarah closed the distance, delivering a spinning kick that sent the hostile crashing unconscious against the wall. "Keep moving," Sarah ordered, reloading her weapon as they ran deeper into the service corridors. Petrov was gasping for breath, his face pale with terror, but he kept pace. They emerged in a loading bay at the back of the station. Sarah's vehicle, a nondescript Honda sedan with MI6 modifications, was parked 50 yards away in the public lot. So close, if they could just reach it. That's when the panel van screeched to a stop at the loading bay entrance, blocking their path. The side door slid open and 4 more hostiles emerged, all carrying submachine guns. Sarah's mind calculated odds in milliseconds. 4 armed enemies, 1 Walther PPK with 8 rounds remaining, 1 frightened informant, and 1 highly trained K9. The numbers weren't good, but she was 007. Impossible odds were part of the job description. "Max, smoke!" Sarah commanded. The dog's tactical vest contained several defensive systems. A compressed smoke grenade detonated from his back, instantly filling the loading bay with thick grey smoke. Sarah grabbed Petrov and dove behind a dumpster as automatic weapons fire tore through the space they'd occupied seconds before. Sarah blind-fired twice to keep the hostiles honest, then used the smoke cover to reposition. Max was already moving, his thermal sensors allowing him to see through the smoke. Sarah watched through her smart glasses as he flanked the hostile formation, finding gaps in their defensive positioning. One hostile advanced through the smoke, weapon raised. Sarah waited until he was 3 feet away, then exploded from cover. She deflected his weapon with her left hand while driving the Walter's barrel under his chin with her right. The shot was muffled by contact, and the hostile dropped. Max hit another hostile from behind, driving him to the ground. Sarah fired twice more, and the loading bay suddenly went quiet, except for the ringing echoes of gunfire and Petrov's terrified breathing. "Clear," Sarah said, already moving toward the Honda. "Let's go!" They ran across the open pavement. Sarah expected more hostiles to emerge, expected sniper fire from the surrounding buildings, expected something to go catastrophically wrong. But they reached the Honda without further incident. Sarah practically threw Petrov into the back seat, Max leaping in after him. She was behind the wheel and accelerating before the doors fully closed. The Honda's modified engine roared to life, and Sarah drove with controlled aggression, weaving through city traffic while constantly checking mirrors for pursuit. Her hands were steady on the wheel, despite the adrenaline flooding her system. This was what she'd trained for. This was what being 007 meant. "Control, package is secure," Sarah reported. "Multiple hostiles neutralized, en route to safe house." "Copy, 007. Excellent work. Metro police are now on scene. The Syndicate operatives are being classified as terrorist suspects. Your cover remains intact." In the back seat, Petrov was clutching his briefcase and muttering in Russian. Max sat beside him, alert but calm, his presence somehow reassuring despite the violence he'd just unleashed. Sarah caught Petrov's eye in the rearview mirror. "You're safe now, Mr. Petrov. We're taking you somewhere secure." "Safe?" Petrov laughed bitterly. "You don't understand. The Syndicate doesn't give up. They'll keep coming. They'll burn the entire city to find me. Then we'll be ready for them," Sarah said grimly. "Because I'm not just any agent, Mr. Petrov. I'm 007, and the Syndicate is about to learn what that designation really means." As they drove through Atlanta's streets toward the safe house, Sarah felt the weight of her new identity settling onto her shoulders. The extraction had been chaotic, violent, and public, everything MI6 had wanted to avoid. But Petrov was alive. The intelligence was secured, and the Syndicate had lost an entire hit squad. Not a bad first day for the new 007. Beside her, in the passenger seat, Max rested his head on the center console, his brown eyes meeting hers. In that moment, Sarah understood what Bond had meant about trust. She and Max had moved through that chaos like one entity, each anticipating the other's actions, each covering the other's vulnerabilities. They were more than handler and K9. They were partners in the truest sense, and together they were unstoppable. The Honda turned onto a tree-lined street in Virginia Highland, leaving behind the chaos of the station. Ahead lay the safe house, debriefing, and the next phase of Operation Stargazing. But for just a moment, Sarah allowed herself to feel the satisfaction of mission accomplished. The new 007 had passed her first test. The legacy had been reborn. And somewhere in London, she suspected James Bond was smiling. The game had only just begun. The safe house basement hummed with electronic equipment as Sarah Collins leaned over the steel interrogation table, her green eyes fixed on Viktor Petrov. The Russian informant looked smaller somehow, diminished by fear and exhaustion. His hands trembled as he opened the leather briefcase, revealing 3 encrypted USB drives and a stack of handwritten notes covered in Cyrillic script. "These contain everything," Petrov said quietly, his English heavily accented. "Blueprints, personnel files, communications logs, everything the Syndicate has planned for the summit attack." Sarah exchanged glances with Max, who sat alert beside the table. Through her encrypted earpiece, she heard M's voice from MI6 headquarters in London. "Get him to walk us through it, 007. We need to understand the scope of this operation." "Mr. Petrov," Sarah said, keeping her tone professional but not unkind. "Start from the beginning. What exactly is the Syndicate planning?" Petrov took a shaky breath. 3 years ago, I was recruited to design a dispersal mechanism for radiological material. What you call a dirty bomb. Not nuclear explosion, you understand, but radioactive contamination spread across large area. Makes city uninhabitable for decades. Sarah felt her stomach tighten. How large an area? Depending on wind conditions, weather patterns, minimum 5 square miles of total contamination, perhaps 10, 15 miles of dangerous exposure zones. Petrov's voice dropped to a whisper. In densely populated city like Atlanta, casualties would be in hundreds of thousands. M's voice crackled in Sarah's ear. "Ask him about the delivery method." "How do they plan to deploy it?" Sarah asked. Petrov pulled out one of the handwritten notes, spreading it across the table. It showed a crude diagram of Atlanta's downtown area with the Georgia World Congress Center circled in red, the venue for the Global Leadership Summit. The summit brings together leaders from 20 nations, presidents, prime ministers, royalty. The Syndicate plans to detonate device inside the convention center during opening ceremony. "Security at that venue will be unprecedented," Sarah objected. "Secret Service, FBI, local police, private security. They'll have every inch of that building locked down. How does the Syndicate plan to penetrate that?" Petrov's expression darkened. "Because they have someone on the inside. Someone with access to security protocols, screening procedures, restricted areas. Someone who can walk the bomb right past every checkpoint." Sarah leaned back, processing this information. An insider threat was every security professional's nightmare. "Do you know who it is?" "No. The Syndicate compartmentalizes information. I only know my piece, the technical specifications of the device. But the infiltration team, they know. Their leader, he coordinates everything." "Who leads the infiltration team?" Sarah pressed. "Man named Konstantin Volkov, former Spetsnaz, now one of the Syndicate's most effective operatives. Very dangerous, very smart. He has killed many people. 007. Many." M's voice cut through the earpiece again. 007, I'm uploading Volkov's file to your secure tablet. Study it carefully. If he's running this operation, we're dealing with a formidable adversary." Sarah pulled up the tablet as the file transferred. Konstantin Volkov's photograph showed a man in his early 40s with a scarred face, cold grey eyes, and the unmistakable bearing of a professional soldier. His service record with Russian Special Forces was exemplary until he'd gone rogue 15 years ago. Since then, he'd worked as a mercenary, assassin, and eventually risen to the Syndicate's inner circle. Operations attributed to Volkov: 12 political assassinations, 4 successful embassy breaches, 2 failed coup attempts, and countless acts of terrorism across 3 continents. He was skilled in demolitions, infiltration, close-quarters combat, and psychological warfare. "He's a ghost," M said grimly. "No known address, no digital footprint, no associates willing to talk. If Volkov is in Atlanta, finding him will be like finding smoke in a hurricane." Sarah studied the photograph, memorizing every detail of Volkov's face. Somewhere in this city, this man was preparing to murder thousands of innocent people, and it was Sarah's job, 007's job, to stop him. "Mr. Petrov, when is the attack scheduled?" Sarah asked. "Opening ceremony is in 4 days. They will move the device into position 24 hours before. Once it's inside the convention center, it will be nearly impossible to remove safely. The dispersal mechanism is designed to detonate if tampered with. 4 days. Less than 100 hours to locate a dirty bomb, identify an insider threat, and neutralize one of the world's most dangerous operatives." The weight of the mission pressed down on Sarah's shoulders, but she kept her expression calm and professional. "The USB drives," Sarah said, gesturing to the briefcase. "What's on them?" "First drive contains technical schematics, how the device works, its signature, how to disable it safely. Second drive has communications intercepts between Syndicate operatives. Encrypted, but your people should be able to break it. Third drive," Petrov hesitated. "Third drive is insurance. Names, locations, financial records. Everyone in the Syndicate's network. If something happens to me, if they kill me, at least the information survives." Sarah collected the drives carefully, sealing them in a protective case. "You did the right thing, Mr. Petrov. These drives could save thousands of lives." "I am not hero," Petrov said bitterly. "I helped build this device. I am responsible for what it can do. The guilt, it became too much. I could not live with myself knowing what they planned." "Then help us stop them," Sarah said firmly. "Tell me everything you know about Volkov, his team, their methods. Every detail matters." For the next 3 hours, Sarah debriefed Petrov, while MI6's technical team analyzed the encrypted drives. Max remained at Sarah's side, his presence somehow calming to the nervous informant. Occasionally, Petrov would reach down to scratch Max's ears, seeming to draw comfort from the contact. The picture that emerged was deeply troubling. The Syndicate had been planning this operation for over 2 years, carefully positioning assets, compromising security personnel, and building their weapon. Volkov's team consisted of at least 8 operatives, all former military or intelligence professionals. They'd established multiple safe houses throughout Atlanta, maintained encrypted communication protocols, and had contingency plans for nearly every scenario. "They anticipated that I might defect," Petrov admitted. "Volkov told me once that betrayal was inevitable in our line of work. He said the Syndicate always had backup plans. If I disappeared, they would assume I'd turned informant and accelerate their timeline." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "Meaning the attack at the station wasn't just about eliminating you, it was about sending a message. They wanted MI6 to know they're not afraid." "More than that," M's voice interjected through the earpiece. "They wanted to flush out our operational response. Now they know we have an agent in Atlanta. They'll be looking for you, 007. Sarah stood, pacing the basement as she processed the tactical situation. The Syndicate knew MI6 was active in Atlanta. They knew someone had extracted Petrov. They would be analyzing security footage from the station, interviewing witnesses, trying to identify the woman with the combat-trained dog who'd killed 6 of their operatives. "We need to move Petrov to a more secure location," Sarah said. "This safe house was meant for temporary operations. If the Syndicate is actively hunting for us, they'll eventually find it. Agreed, M replied. I'm arranging transport to a black site facility outside the city, but we can't move him until nightfall. Too much risk of being spotted during daylight transit. You'll need to hold position for the next 6 hours. 6 hours in a compromised location with a target on their backs. Sarah had faced worse odds as a cop, but those situations hadn't involved international terrorists with unlimited resources and complete willingness to kill civilians. Max, perimeter check, Sarah commanded. The Belgian Malinois immediately trotted up the basement stairs, his enhanced sensors scanning the house and surrounding area for threats. Through the camera feed on her smart glasses, Sarah watched as Max methodically checked each room, each window, each possible entry point. His thermal imaging detected normal heat signatures from neighboring houses, families going about their evening routines, unaware of the deadly drama unfolding in their midst. Sarah returned her attention to Petrov. Tell me about the insider. You said you don't know their identity, but what do you know about their access level? High level, very high. Someone with clearance to move freely through secure areas without raising suspicion. Volkov referred to this person as the Cardinal, and I assume it's code name. Gender? Unknown. Volkov was careful never to use pronouns. The Cardinal could be man or woman. Sarah made notes on her tablet, already formulating search parameters. Someone with high-level security clearance for the Global Leadership Summit would be on a very short list. Secret Service, FBI, senior diplomatic staff, convention center security directors, maybe 200 or 300 people total. MI6 and CIA analysts could cross-reference that list with financial records, communications patterns, travel histories. But 4 days wasn't much time for that kind of investigation. Sarah needed a different approach. She needed to think like a spy, not a cop. The device itself, Sarah said, returning to the technical aspects. How large is it? Approximately size of large suitcase, maybe 40 kilograms total weight. Disguised as audio-visual equipment. I designed it to look like standard commercial speakers with amplifier components, detailed enough to pass visual inspection, even by trained security personnel, but not detailed enough to pass X-ray or radioactive detection. Petrov shook his head. No, the shielding I designed blocks most gamma radiation, but sophisticated sensors would still detect anomalies. That's why the Cardinal is so important. They will ensure the device bypasses electronic screening. Sarah's mind raced through possibilities. If the Cardinal could bypass screening, that suggested access to security protocols and schedules. They would know when and where radiation detectors were active, which entry points had less surveillance, how to manipulate the security infrastructure from within. 07, M's voice interrupted her thoughts. We've completed preliminary analysis of the first USB drive. The device specifications are concerning. Petrov wasn't exaggerating about the potential contamination radius. If this weapon detonates in downtown Atlanta, the entire city center becomes a dead zone. Economic impact alone would be catastrophic, not to mention the humanitarian cost. Can Q Branch develop a method to safely disable it? Sarah asked. Possibly. But they'll need physical access to the device to confirm Petrov's schematics are accurate. The Syndicate may have modified the design after Petrov's defection. We can't risk a disarm attempt based on potentially outdated intelligence. Sarah understood the implication. They needed to locate the device before the Syndicate moved it into the convention center. Once it was in position, surrounded by thousands of civilians and protected by the Cardinal's insider access, extraction would become exponentially more difficult. Max returned to the basement, his body language indicating no immediate threats detected. Sarah felt marginally better knowing their perimeter was secure, at least for the moment. Mr. Petrov, where is the Syndicate keeping the device now? Sarah asked. I don't know exact location, but Volkov mentioned they needed climate-controlled storage. The radioactive material requires specific temperature and humidity conditions to remain stable. Industrial facility, perhaps. or commercial storage unit with environmental controls. Sarah accessed Atlanta's city database through her secure connection. Climate-controlled storage facilities. There were dozens of them scattered throughout the metropolitan area. Warehouses, storage complexes, even some office buildings with specialized storage rooms. Narrowing the search would require more intelligence. The second USB drive, Sarah said. The communications intercepts. How recent are they? Most recent is from 3 days ago, right before I contacted MI6. Earlier messages go back 6 months. All encrypted with Syndicate's proprietary system, very secure, military grade. M spoke through the earpiece. Our cryptography team is working on it now. They're estimating 12 to 18 hours for full decryption. Could be sooner if we get lucky with the encryption keys. 12 hours. Sarah glanced at her watch. 17:30 local time. The transport for Petrov wouldn't arrive until after dark, probably around 22 am. That left 4.5 hours of vulnerability in a potentially compromised location. Sarah made a decision. Control, I'm relocating Petrov to a secondary position. Staying static makes us a target. We'll maintain mobile status until transport arrives. There was a pause, then M's voice returned with a note of approval. Smart thinking, 007. Where will you go? Public spaces, shopping districts, restaurants, crowded areas where Syndicate operatives can't act without witnesses. We blend into the civilian population until extraction time. Risky, M observed, but sound tactics. Keep your comms active. If anything changes, we'll notify you immediately. Sarah turned to Petrov. We're leaving. Pack only what you absolutely need. 1 small bag, nothing that will draw attention. Petrov nodded, moving with the nervous energy of a man who knew his life hung by a thread. While he gathered his minimal belongings, Sarah conducted a final weapons check. Her Walter PPK was fully loaded, and she had 2 spare magazines. Not ideal for a prolonged engagement, but sufficient for defensive purposes. Max's tactical vest had been restocked with defensive systems, smoke grenades, tracking beacons, and a small medical kit containing coagulants and pain suppressors. Sarah hoped she wouldn't need any of it, but hope wasn't a strategy. 20 minutes later, they left the safe house through the back entrance. Sarah had changed into different clothes. A casual sundress with a light cardigan that concealed her weapon. Max wore a standard service dog vest without the tactical enhancements visible. To any observer, they looked like a woman walking her dog with a male companion, perhaps heading out for dinner. The Virginia Highland neighborhood was busy with early evening foot traffic. Restaurants were opening for dinner service. Shops were conducting last-minute business, and pedestrians moved along the sidewalks in that relaxed way that characterized Atlanta's more upscale districts. Sarah felt a pang of nostalgia. She'd walked these streets as a cop, knew many of the business owners had once considered this area home. Now she was a spy, protecting an informant from international terrorists while carrying a weapon concealed under casual clothing. Life had certainly taken an unexpected turn. They walked 3 blocks to Ponce City Market, a massive converted warehouse that now housed dozens of shops, restaurants, and food vendors. The building was always crowded, always busy, with multiple entrances and exits, perfect for maintaining situational awareness while blending into the civilian population. Sarah bought coffee from a cafe and found a table near the main atrium where she could observe the entrance points. Petrov sat across from her, nursing his own coffee with trembling hands. Max settled under the table, his enhanced sensors passively monitoring the environment. "How long?" Petrov asked quietly. "How long until I'm safe?" Sarah met his eyes. "Safety is relative, Mr. Petrov, but once we get you to the Black Site facility, the Syndicate will have a much harder time reaching you. Just stay calm, stay alert, and follow my instructions exactly." An hour passed, then another. Sarah's eyes constantly scanned the crowd, categorizing faces, identifying potential threats. Years of police work had given her an instinct for spotting predators. The way they moved, the way they observed their surroundings, the subtle tells that separated professionals from civilians. She saw nothing alarming, just ordinary people going about their evening routines. Max suddenly tensed, his ears pricking forward. Through her smart glasses, Sarah saw what had caught his attention. A man in a dark jacket, earpiece visible, moving through the crowd with purpose. Not casual browsing, not random wandering, hunting. Sarah's hand moved subtly toward her concealed weapon. "Petrov, we're moving. Now, stay close." They stood smoothly, Sarah's body positioned to shield Petrov as they moved toward the south exit. Max flanked their left side, his training evident in the way he maintained protective positioning without appearing threatening. The man in the dark jacket adjusted his trajectory, moving to intercept. Sarah caught a glimpse of his face. Slavic features, cold eyes, professional demeanor. Syndicate. She altered course, pulling Petrov into a crowded food court area. More people meant more witnesses, which meant the Syndicate operative would think twice before taking aggressive action. But Sarah knew that advantage was temporary. Where there was one operative, there were usually more. Her earpiece crackled. 007, we're picking up unusual radio traffic in your vicinity. Multiple encrypted signals using Syndicate frequencies. You may have company. Already aware, Control, Sarah murmured. At least one hostile confirmed, possibly more. Transport is still 90 minutes out. Can you maintain evasion that long? Sarah assessed their tactical situation. One exit was blocked by the operative she'd spotted. Other exits would likely have additional surveillance. The building had multiple levels and dozens of shops. Good for losing pursuit, but also good for ambush tactics. Affirmative, Sarah said with more confidence than she felt. We'll manage. They moved to the second level, using escalators and crowds for concealment. Sarah's mind was already 3 steps ahead, planning escape routes, identifying choke points, calculating odds. This was what she'd trained for, not just the combat, but the chess game of urban evasion. Max suddenly stopped, growling low in his throat. Sarah followed his line of sight and felt her blood run cold. 2 more operatives, flanking positions, moving with coordinated precision. They'd been boxed in. Change of plans, Sarah said calmly into her comms. We're compromised. Need immediate backup options. Negative 007. No assets available in your vicinity. You're on your own. Of course they were. Being 007 meant being operational even when support was unavailable. It meant making impossible choices and living with the consequences. Sarah spotted a service corridor marked Employees Only. It was a risk. Service corridors could be dead ends or could lead to loading docks and escape routes, but staying in the public areas meant eventual confrontation with multiple hostiles while surrounded by civilians. "Follow me," Sarah commanded, pulling Petrov toward the service door. They slipped through just as the 2 operatives reached their last position. The corridor was narrow and industrial, lined with storage cages and electrical panels. Sarah moved quickly but carefully, Max's enhanced vision helping navigate the dimly lit space. Behind them, the service door opened. Footsteps echoed in the corridor, multiple people, moving fast. Sarah ran, pulling Petrov along. The corridor branched left toward what looked like loading docks. Daylight was visible through grimy windows. An exit. Freedom. They burst through the loading dock doors into the late afternoon sun. Sarah's Honda was blocks away, but there were other options. Taxis, ride-share vehicles, even commandeering a civilian car if necessary. A black SUV screeched to a stop at the loading dock entrance, blocking their path. The doors opened, and 4 operatives emerged, all armed with compact submachine guns. No more subtlety, no more pretense. The Syndicate had decided that eliminating Petrov was worth the exposure. Sarah drew her Walther, positioning herself between the operatives and Petrov. "Max, protect!" The dog moved to guard Petrov, his body language aggressive now, ready to attack anyone who approached. The lead operative stepped forward, the same man Sarah had spotted inside. Up close, she could see the scar tissue on his face, the cold calculation in his eyes. This was someone who'd killed before and would kill again without hesitation. "Sarah Collins," the man said in accented English, "former Atlanta Police K-9 officer, Now working for British intelligence. Very impressive career change. Sarah kept her weapon trained on his center mass. You're well informed. Doesn't change the outcome. Walk away now and you live. Push this and you die. The operative smiled. Bold words, but you're outnumbered 4-1, outgunned. Your only advantage is the dog, and even trained animals can be killed. Try it, Sarah said flatly. See what happens. For a moment they stood in tableau, Sarah with her pistol, the four operatives with their submachine guns, Petrov frozen in terror, and Max coiled like a spring, ready to explode into violence. The operative's smile faded. Volkov sends his regards. He's very interested in meeting the new 007. Perhaps we'll arrange that introduction soon. Looking forward to it, Sarah replied. The operative made a subtle hand gesture, and his team lowered their weapons marginally, still ready, but no longer in immediate firing position. This isn't over, Agent Collins. Petrov has information we need to recover. The device will be deployed on schedule. Your interference is merely a temporary inconvenience. We'll see about that. The operative retreated to the SUV, his team covering him. They drove away slowly, deliberately, making it clear they weren't afraid. They were simply choosing a different time and place for confrontation. Sarah didn't lower her weapon until the SUV was out of sight. Then she allowed herself one long breath before turning to Petrov. You okay? The Russian nodded shakily. I thought they would kill us. They would have if they could have done it quietly, Sarah said. But gunfight in a public space draws attention. Police, media, witnesses with smartphones. The Syndicate wants to stay hidden until the summit attack. Her earpiece activated. 007, transport is 10 minutes out. We're sending the extraction vehicle to your current location. Get Petrov secured, then stand by for further instructions. Copy that, Control. The next 10 minutes felt like an eternity. Sarah kept her weapon ready, scanning for additional threats while Max maintained protective positioning around Petrov. When the armored van finally arrived, unmarked but heavily modified for security transport, Sarah felt a wave of relief. She secured Petrov inside the van, watching as it pulled away with an escort team she recognized from MI6's Special Operations Unit. The informant was safe now, or as safe as anyone could be while the Syndicate remained operational. Sarah stood in the loading dock area, Max at her side, processing everything that had happened. The Syndicate knew she was in Atlanta. They knew her identity. And somehow they'd tracked her movements to Ponce City Market despite all her precautions. That suggested surveillance capabilities beyond what MI6 had anticipated. It suggested resources, technology, and insider information that made the Syndicate even more dangerous than initially assessed. M's voice came through the earpiece, concern evident in her tone. 007, what's your status? Petrov is secure. I'm operational but potentially compromised. The Syndicate has my identity and tracked my movements. They're more capable than we thought. Agreed. We're pulling surveillance footage from the market area now, trying to identify how they found you. In the meantime, return to the original safe house and await further orders. We're reassessing the operational plan based on this new information. Sarah whistled for Max, and together they walked back through Virginia Highland toward the safe house. The streets were quiet now as evening settled over the neighborhood. Streetlights flickered on, casting warm pools of light on the sidewalks. As Sarah walked, she replayed the confrontation in her mind. The operative had been professional, controlled, confident. He'd known her name, her background, her current operational status. That level of intelligence suggested the Syndicate had sources inside Western security agencies, maybe even inside MI6 itself. The thought was chilling. If the Syndicate could track her movements and identify her personally, they could potentially compromise every aspect of Operation Stargazing. Every safe house, every communication protocol, every tactical plan. Sarah reached the safe house and conducted a thorough security sweep before entering. Inside, she locked down the building and activated all defensive systems. Then she sat at the command center in the basement, pulling up everything MI6 had on the Syndicate's operational capabilities. Max lay beside her chair, his presence comforting. Sarah reached down to scratch behind his ears, feeling the soft fur and the solid reality of her partner. Whatever happened next, they'd face it together. Her computer chimed with an incoming encrypted message from Sarah opened it and felt her blood run cold. The second USB drive, the communications intercepts, had been partially decrypted, and the first message that had been decoded was explicit. The Syndicate had infiltrated MI6's Atlanta operations. They had access to safe house locations, agent identities, and operational plans. Sarah Collins, call sign 007, was now operating in a hostile environment where even her own agency's security had been compromised. Every move she made could be monitored. Every decision could be anticipated. The mission had just become exponentially more dangerous. And somewhere in Atlanta, Konstantin Volkov was watching, waiting, planning. Sarah stared at the message, her mind racing through implications. Then she made a decision. If MI6's operational security was compromised, she would operate outside official channels. She would use her knowledge of Atlanta, her connections from her police days, her instincts as both a cop and a spy. She would hunt Volkov and the Syndicate her way. Sarah opened a secure line to M. Control, I'm requesting operational independence, full autonomy to pursue the Syndicate using any means necessary. There was a long pause. Then M's voice returned, measured and serious. 07, you understand what you're asking for. No backup, no oversight, no support infrastructure. You'd be completely on your own. I understand. But if the Syndicate has compromised our security, traditional operational methods are useless. I need freedom to operate unpredictably, using methods they can't anticipate. Another pause. Then, approved. As of now, you have full operational independence. Your only directive is to stop the Syndicate's attack by any means necessary. Use your judgment, use your skills, and use that magnificent dog of yours. Britain and Atlanta are counting on you, 007. Understood, Control. Collins out. Sarah terminated the connection and sat back in her chair. She was now completely on her own. The new 007 operating without a net in a city she'd sworn to protect. The stakes couldn't be higher, the odds couldn't be worse, but Sarah Collins had spent her entire adult life facing impossible odds and finding ways to win. This would be no different. She looked at Max, who met her gaze with complete trust and loyalty. Just you and me now, buddy. Time to show the Syndicate what the new 007 can really do. Max's tail wagged once, and Sarah felt a smile cross her face, despite the gravity of their situation. The hunt was on. The Atlanta night was humid and alive with the sounds of the city. Distant traffic, the hum of air conditioning units, the occasional siren cutting through the darkness. Sarah Collins stood on the rooftop of an abandoned warehouse in the old Fourth Ward, her silhouette barely visible against the skyline. 3 hours had passed since M granted her operational independence, and Sarah had spent that time doing what she did best, hunting. Max sat beside her, his enhanced senses scanning the streets below. Through her smart glasses, Sarah studied the feed from his cameras, thermal signatures, movement patterns, anything that might indicate Syndicate activity. The warehouse they were watching had been flagged in the decrypted communications as a potential storage location, climate-controlled, isolated, with minimal security presence. Exactly the kind of place you'd hide a dirty bomb. Sarah's earpiece crackled with static, then M's voice cut through. 007, I'm uploading new intelligence. We've identified 3 more potential storage sites based on the decrypted messages. But there's something else you need to know. Sarah tensed. M's tone suggested bad news. Go ahead, Control. We ran a security audit on all personnel with knowledge of your Atlanta operation. One name came up with concerning connections, Agent David Morrison, MI6 liaison to the FBI's Atlanta field office. Financial records show deposits from shell companies linked to Syndicate front organizations. We believe he's the Cardinal. Sarah felt the words hit like a physical blow. David Morrison. She'd met him twice during her transition to MI6, found him professional if somewhat cold. He had access to everything: safe house locations, operational protocols, security clearances for the Global Leadership Summit. If Morrison was compromised, the Syndicate had been 5 steps ahead from the beginning. "Has he been detained?" Sarah asked. "Negative. Morrison disappeared 6 hours ago. His apartment was cleared out, his vehicle abandoned at Hartsfield-Jackson Airport. We're checking passenger manifests, but he likely used false documentation. He's in the wind." Sarah's mind raced through implications. Morrison knew her identity, knew Petrov had been extracted, knew MI6's operational strategy. He'd probably warned Volkov that the new 007 was operating with full autonomy. Every advantage of surprise was gone. Control: if Morrison warned the Syndicate about the decrypted communications, they'll move the device to a new location. The storage sites in those messages may already be compromised. "Agreed," M said grimly, "but it's the only lead we have. Check the warehouses anyway. Maybe we'll get lucky." Lucky? Sarah almost laughed. Luck had nothing to do with espionage. Success came from skill, preparation, and the willingness to take calculated risks. Right now, the calculation wasn't favorable. "Copy that, Control. Moving to first location now." Sarah descended from the rooftop using a fire escape, Max following with practiced ease. They moved through the darkened streets like shadows, avoiding security cameras and pedestrian traffic. The first warehouse was 2 miles away, in an industrial district where security was lax and questions were rarely asked. 20 minutes of careful approach brought them to the perimeter. Sarah used her tablet to hack the building's security system, a laughably outdated setup that took less than 90 seconds to compromise. The cameras looped to show empty corridors, while Sarah and Max slipped inside through a loading dock entrance. The warehouse interior was vast and dark, filled with storage containers and industrial equipment. Sarah activated her night vision, turning the darkness into shades of green. Max's enhanced senses painted a more detailed picture. Thermal signatures showing the building was empty except for their presence. Audio pickups detecting only the ambient hum of climate control systems. They cleared the building methodically, checking each container, each locked room, each potential hiding spot. Sarah found evidence of recent activity: scuff marks on the concrete floor, disturbed dust patterns, a discarded cigarette butt that was still relatively fresh. Someone had been here within the past 24 hours, but no bomb, no Syndicate operatives, no Volkov. "First location is negative," Sarah reported. "Evidence suggests recent evacuation. They knew we were coming." M's response was terse. "Move to location 2. Time is running out. 007. The second warehouse yielded similar results. Recently abandoned, evidence of hasty departure, nothing of tactical value. Sarah felt frustration building. The Syndicate was always 1 step ahead, always anticipating her moves. Morrison's betrayal had given them an insurmountable advantage. At the third location, a climate-controlled storage facility in an industrial park, Sarah's luck finally changed. Max detected a chemical signature that matched the radioactive shielding materials described in Petrov's technical documents. Faint traces, but unmistakable. "Control, I have a positive hit on radioactive residue." The device was here, probably within the last 48 hours. "Can you determine where they moved it?" M asked. Sarah examined the storage unit carefully. Security footage had been wiped, but physical evidence remained. Tire tracks in the parking lot. A heavy vehicle, probably a panel van. Oil drips suggesting mechanical issues, and most tellingly a parking receipt partially buried in nearby trash. Sarah retrieved the receipt and felt her pulse quicken. It was from a parking garage downtown, time-stamped 6 hours ago. The location was less than a mile from the Georgia World Congress Center. "Control, I have a lead. Downtown parking garage, 6th and Peachtree. They moved the device closer to the target site." "Understood. Proceed with caution, 007. If the device is that close to the convention center, Volkov's team will be nearby." Sarah drove through Atlanta's nighttime streets with controlled urgency. The city was beautiful at night, Lights reflecting off glass towers, streets alive with people heading to restaurants and bars, all of them oblivious to the deadly game being played in their midst. The parking garage was a multi-level structure serving several office buildings. Sarah parked 2 blocks away and approached on foot, Max at her side. Her Walter PPK was concealed but easily accessible. She'd also acquired additional equipment from the safe house: flashbang grenades, zip ties, a suppressor for the pistol. The garage was mostly empty at this hour. Sarah moved between parked cars, using shadows and concrete pillars for cover. Max's sensors painted a tactical picture: 3 heat signatures on the 4th level, clustered near a panel van that matched the oil drip pattern from the storage facility. Sarah activated her comms. "Control, I have visual on 3 potential hostiles, 4th level, likely guarding the device. Can you confirm the device is present?" M asked. "Negative. Need closer approach for positive identification." 007. I'm obligated to remind you that if the device is there, attempting to secure it alone is extraordinarily risky. We can mobilize FBI tactical teams, which would give the Syndicate time to detonate or relocate, Sarah interrupted. And if Morrison is still feeding them information, those FBI teams might be compromised too. I'm going in. M sighed, the sound conveying both resignation and respect. Understood. You have operational independence, 007. Use it wisely. Sarah approached the 4th level via a stairwell, her footsteps silent on the concrete. Through Max's camera feed, she could see the 3 guards more clearly now, all armed with compact submachine guns, all maintaining professional watch patterns. These weren't amateur thugs. They were trained operatives, probably former military. Sarah needed a distraction, something that would draw their attention away from the van while she moved into position. She pulled out her tablet and accessed the parking garage's electrical system. It took 30 seconds to identify the circuit breaker for the 4th level's lighting. Sarah counted down silently. 3, 2, 1. The lights went dark. Immediately the guards reacted, shouting in Russian, flashlights activating, weapons coming up to ready positions. In the chaos of sudden darkness and confusion, Sarah moved. She covered 20 feet in seconds, using parked cars for concealment. Max flanked right, moving with predatory silence. The guards were focused on the stairwell entrance, the most obvious attack vector. They never considered someone might already be on their level. Sarah reached the panel van and risked a quick look inside through the rear windows. Her breath caught. There it was, a large case disguised as professional audio equipment, exactly as Petrov had described. The radioactive device that could turn downtown Atlanta into a contamination zone. One of the guards was moving toward the van, flashlight sweeping the area. Sarah had maybe 5 seconds before she was spotted. She made a split-second decision. Capture was better than killing. Dead guards couldn't provide intelligence about Volkov's location. Sarah emerged from cover with her Walter raised. "Don't move! Hands where I can see them!" The guard spun toward her, bringing his weapon up. Sarah fired once, a precision shot that hit his shoulder, spinning him around. His weapon clattered to the concrete. The other 2 guards reacted immediately, automatic weapons firing in her direction. Sarah dove behind a concrete pillar as bullets sparked off stone and metal. Max launched himself at the nearest guard, 75 pounds of trained aggression hitting the man at chest height. They went down hard, Max's fangs finding the guard's gun arm and clamping down with crushing force. The 3rd guard swung his weapon toward Max. Sarah couldn't get a clear shot without risking hitting her partner. She did the only thing possible. She ran directly at the guard, closing the distance before he could adjust his aim. Sarah hit him like a linebacker, driving her shoulder into his midsection. They crashed into a parked sedan, setting off the car alarm. The guard tried to bring his weapon around, but Sarah trapped his arm, delivering a brutal elbow strike to his jaw. His eyes rolled back, and he slumped unconscious. The 1st guard, the one Sarah had shot, was trying to crawl toward his dropped weapon. Sarah kicked it away and zip-tied his hands behind his back. Max had the 2nd guard completely subdued. maintaining his grip until Sarah signaled release. Within 90 seconds, all 3 guards were secured and disarmed. Sarah allowed herself one moment to breathe, then moved to examine the device in the van. It was exactly as Petrov had described, professional construction disguised as commercial audio equipment, but far too heavy for what it appeared to be. Sarah activated her tablet and ran a radiation scan. The readings confirmed her worst fears. This was the weapon. Control, I have the device, confirming positive identification based on Petrov's specifications. Outstanding work, 007! M's voice carried genuine relief. We're dispatching a bomb disposal team immediately. They'll be there in 20 minutes. Negative, Control. Sarah studied the device carefully, noting the anti-tamper mechanisms Petrov had warned about. The Syndicate will have surveillance on this location. The moment a bomb disposal team arrives, they'll know the device is compromised. Volkov might have a remote detonation capability. We can't risk it. Then what do you propose? Em asked, tension creeping back into her voice. I move the device myself. Take it somewhere isolated, where it can't hurt anyone if it detonates. Then we bring in the specialists. That's insane. You're not trained in bomb disposal. Neither are dead civilians, Sarah interrupted. And that's what we'll have if this thing goes off downtown. I'm moving it, Control. That's final. M was silent for a moment, then, God help me for authorizing this. Proceed, 007, but for the record, this is the most reckless thing a 007 agent has attempted in the program's history. Then I'm living up to the legacy, Sarah said with grim humor. She zip-tied the 3 guards to a support pillar, ensuring they couldn't escape or warn their colleagues. Then she examined the van, keys still in the ignition, fuel tank 3/4 full. Perfect. Sarah carefully loaded Max into the passenger seat, then took her position behind the wheel. The device sat in the back, its presence seeming to radiate menace despite the shielding. Sarah started the engine and began the careful drive down through the parking garage levels. Every bump made her heart skip. Every turn felt like it might trigger the anti-tamper mechanisms. Sarah's hands were steady on the wheel, but sweat dripped down her spine. If the device detonated now, she and Max would be vaporized instantly, and everyone within a mile would receive lethal radiation exposure. The garage exit appeared ahead. Sarah paid the automated parking fee with cash, keeping her face angled away from the cameras. Then she was on the street, driving through downtown Atlanta with a dirty bomb in the back of a stolen van. Control, I need a location. Somewhere isolated, at least 5 miles from any residential or commercial areas, preferably with water access in case the disposal team needs it for cooling. Sarah heard rapid typing, then M's voice returned. There's an abandoned quarry 15 miles south of the city. Deep pit, flooded at the bottom, completely isolated, sending coordinates now. The drive took 30 agonizing minutes. Sarah kept to back roads and industrial routes, avoiding traffic cameras and police checkpoints. Every passing car felt like a potential threat. Every traffic light felt like a chance for disaster. Max sat calmly in the passenger seat, his presence somehow reassuring. Sarah reached over once to scratch behind his ears. If this goes badly, buddy, I'm sorry I got you into this mess. Max leaned into her hand, tail wagging slightly. Trust and loyalty in their purest form. The quarry appeared ahead, a vast excavation site surrounded by chain-link fencing and warning signs. Sarah cut the fence with wire cutters from the van's toolkit and drove carefully down a dirt access road. The quarry pit yawned ahead, maybe 200 feet deep and half-filled with dark water. Sarah parked at the edge, leaving the engine running. She opened the van's rear doors and stared at the device. This was it, the moment of maximum risk. She needed to activate a tracking beacon so the bomb disposal team could find it, but touching the device might trigger the anti-tamper systems. Control, I'm about to attach a tracking beacon. If you don't hear from me in 60 seconds, assume worst-case scenario. Understood, 07? And Sarah, it's been an honor. Sarah smiled despite the fear. The honor's mine, Control. Here goes nothing. She reached into the van with hands that didn't shake, years of training and innate courage keeping her steady. The tracking beacon was the size of a quarter, magnetic backing allowing it to attach to any metal surface. Sarah placed it carefully on the device casing, feeling it click into place. Nothing happened. No explosion, no alarm, no detonation. Sarah released a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Beacon is active. Device is secure. I'm clear of the area. Thank God, Em breathed. Disposal team is en route. ETA 45 minutes. Sarah climbed back into the van and drove away from the quarry. She'd done it, secured the device, prevented the attack, saved potentially hundreds of thousands of lives. It should have felt like victory, but something nagged at Sarah's tactical instincts. This had been too easy. The guards at the parking garage had been competent but not exceptional. The device had been left with minimal security. For an operation the Syndicate had spent 2 years planning, the security seemed inadequate, unless it was a trap. Sarah's blood ran cold. Control, run an analysis on the device's signature. Compare it to Petrov's specifications. I need confirmation that what we found is the actual weapon, not a decoy. Stand by. Sarah drove in tense silence while MI6's technical team ran the analysis. Max sensed her tension, pressing his head against her arm in silent support. M's voice returned, and Sarah's worst fears were confirmed. Zoo-07, the device signature shows anomalies. The radioactive shielding matches Petrov's specs, but the internal configuration is different, simpler. We're running additional tests, but preliminary assessment suggests... It's a decoy, Sarah finished. The real bomb is somewhere else. I'm afraid so. Petrov warned that Volkov had contingency plans. This appears to be one of them. A fake device to draw our attention while the real weapon is moved into position. Sarah slammed her hand against the steering wheel in frustration. She'd been played. They'd all been played. The Syndicate had sacrificed 3 guards and a sophisticated fake to make MI6 believe the threat was neutralized. Meanwhile, the real bomb was probably already inside the Georgia World Congress Center, protected by Morrison's insider access. Control, we need to shut down the summit, evacuate the convention center, delay the opening ceremony. Already considered and rejected, M interrupted. Political leadership won't authorize a shutdown based on intelligence they consider speculative. 20 heads of state are already in Atlanta with full security details. Canceling now would be seen as weakness, would damage international relations, would hand the Syndicate a propaganda victory, even if they never detonate a weapon. So we do nothing? Sarah couldn't keep the anger from her voice. We just let them walk a bomb into a building full of world leaders. No, we do what we do best. We find the real device, we identify the Cardinal's actual identity, and we stop this attack before it happens. You have 36 hours until the opening ceremony, 007. Use them. Sarah forced herself to think tactically. The decoy had been elaborate and expensive. The Syndicate wouldn't have deployed it unless they were concerned about MI6's investigation, which meant the decrypted communications had worried them, which meant those communications might contain clues to the real plan if analyzed correctly. Control, have the cryptography team focus on messages from the past 72 hours. Ignore anything older. The Syndicate will have changed plans after Morrison's exposure. Look for references to alternative storage sites, transport schedules, anything that might indicate where the real device is located. Already in progress. We'll have results within 6 hours. 6 hours. Sarah checked her watch. 03:00 local time. The opening ceremony was scheduled for 14:00 tomorrow afternoon. Less than 11 hours. Not enough time. Unless she could get to Volkov directly. Control. Morrison was the liaison between MI6 and the FBI. He would have had direct contact with Volkov to coordinate the insider operations. There must be a communication trail, dead drops, encrypted emails, something. We've been analyzing Morrison's communications for hours. Everything is encrypted with military-grade protocols. It'll take days to break. Then don't break it, Sarah interrupted. Trace it. Find out where the signals originated. Volkov has to communicate from somewhere physical. Find that location, and we find him." There was a pause. Then M's voice returned with grudging admiration. "That's actually brilliant. I'll put our signals intelligence team on it immediately." Sarah drove back toward the city, her mind working through scenarios. The Syndicate had outmaneuvered her at every turn, but they'd also revealed vulnerabilities. The elaborate decoy suggested they were worried about discovery. Morrison's exposure had forced them to accelerate their timeline, and Volkov's need to communicate with his insider meant he was maintaining a physical presence in Atlanta. Predators left trails. Sarah just needed to find them. She returned to the safe house as dawn began to break over Atlanta's skyline. The city was waking up. Morning commuters heading to work, joggers on the streets, the rhythms of normal life continuing despite the deadly drama unfolding beneath the surface. Sarah secured the safe house and allowed herself 2 hours of sleep, not because she wanted rest, but because exhausted operators made fatal mistakes. Max curled up beside her bed, his breathing slow and steady. Even in sleep, he remained alert to potential threats. When Sarah woke, she found an encrypted message from M. The signals intelligence team had traced Morrison's communications to a commercial office building in Midtown, the same building that housed several companies providing services to the convention center, security firms, catering companies, audio-visual contractors, all perfectly positioned to gain access to restricted areas. And in that building, on the 7th floor, was an office leased to a company called Apex Solutions, a security consulting firm that existed on paper but had no actual business operations. The perfect front for Syndicate operations. Sarah studied the building's layout on her tablet. Security was professional but not military grade. Multiple access points, regular business hours, public areas and restricted floors. Getting inside would be relatively easy. Getting to the 7th floor without alerting Volkov would be harder. "Control, I'm moving on Apex Solutions. If Volkov is using that office as a command center, I need to hit him before he can relocate again." -007. We're still analyzing the site. Give us 2 hours to develop a proper assault plan. "We don't have 2 hours, Sarah countered. "Every minute we wait is another minute for Volkov to move the device into final position. I'm going in now." Sarah. M's use of her first name was deliberate. "I gave you operational independence because I trust your judgment. But I'm asking you, as someone who's lost too many good agents, don't let pride override caution. Wait for backup." Sarah considered for a moment, then shook her head. "It's not pride, ma'am. It's math. One agent moving fast has better odds than a tactical team moving slow. Volkov is expecting overwhelming force. He's not expecting someone to walk through the front door." M was silent for a long moment then. "Go, but 007, come back alive. Britain needs you. That dog needs you." "That's the plan, Control. Collins out." Sarah dressed in business casual attire. Slacks, blouse, blazer concealing her Walter. She looked like any other professional heading to a Midtown office. Max wore a standard service dog vest, his tactical equipment hidden beneath. Together, they looked completely unremarkable. The office building was busy with morning traffic. Sarah walked through the lobby with a confident stride, nodding to security as if she belonged. She'd printed fake credentials, identifying her as a consultant for one of the legitimate companies in the building. The credentials would fail under scrutiny, but they'd pass a casual glance. She took the elevator to the 6th floor, then used a service stairwell to reach the 7th. The corridor was quiet, doors closed, no obvious security presence. Apex Solutions was at the end of the hall, a frosted glass door with tasteful lettering. Sarah approached carefully, Max at her side. Through her smart glasses, she accessed the building's internal security cameras. The feed showed the corridor empty, but she couldn't access cameras inside the Apex Solutions office. Either they were disabled or on a separate system. Sarah tested the door handle. Locked, but not the sophisticated electronic system she'd expected. Just a standard commercial lock. Either Volkov was confident no one would find this location, or it was abandoned. Sarah pulled out her lock-picking tools, another skill she'd mastered during MI6 training. 30 seconds later, the lock clicked open. She drew her Walther and entered in one smooth motion, weapon tracking for targets. The office was empty. Not just empty, abandoned in a hurry. Computer monitors still powered on but displaying blank screens, coffee cups half full. Papers scattered across desks, evidence of a hasty evacuation within the past hour. Control, location is compromised. Volkov evacuated recently, probably within 60 minutes. They knew you were coming, M said grimly. Morrison must have warned them you'd trace the communications. Sarah moved through the office, searching for anything useful. Most documentation had been destroyed, but she found a fragment of a printed schedule partially burned in a trash can. She photographed it with her phone and sent it to MI6 for analysis. Max was sniffing around the office, his enhanced sensors detecting chemical traces. He stopped at a particular desk, pawing at the surface. Sarah examined it carefully and found a small electronic device hidden under the desk, a radio transmitter, still warm. Control, I found a transmitter, still active, probably used for final communications before evacuation. Can you trace the signal? Attempting now. Stand by. Sarah's tactical instincts were screaming danger. Volkov had evacuated too recently. He might still be in the building, or worse, he might be watching, waiting to see who came looking for him. Max, search, Sarah commanded quietly. The dog moved through the office with focused intensity, his training evident in every controlled movement. He stopped at a closed closet door, growling low in his throat. Sarah approached with weapon raised. She jerked the door open and found herself face to face with a young woman in business attire, bound and gagged, eyes wide with terror. Sarah holstered her weapon and removed the gag. "Are you okay? What's your name?" Taylor, the woman gasped. "Taylor Chen. I'm the building manager. They grabbed me this morning when I came to check a maintenance request. The man, he had a scarred face, cold eyes. He said I was insurance." "Konstantin Volkov," Sarah said grimly. "How long ago did he leave? Maybe 15 minutes? He got a phone call, said something in Russian, then they all just left. Abandoned me here." Sarah cut the woman's bonds with a tactical knife. "Can you walk? I need to get you out of here." "I think so." The explosion was deafening. Sarah's ears rang as she was thrown backward by the blast wave. The office wall disintegrated in a fireball of heat and pressure. Sarah grabbed Taylor Chen and threw them both behind a concrete support pillar as debris rained down around them. Max yelped but stayed close, his training overriding panic. Sarah shielded him with her body as secondary explosions rippled through the office. The floor lurched sickeningly, threatening to collapse entirely. "Control!" Sarah shouted into her comms. "Building is compromised. Explosives detonated. Multiple casualties likely." M's response was barely audible through the ringing in Sarah's ears. "Emergency services are en route. Get out of that building now. 007." Sarah pulled Taylor to her feet. The woman was in shock, bleeding from a head wound, but mobile. The office was a disaster. Walls collapsed, ceiling tiles hanging loose, smoke filling the air. The door they'd entered through was blocked by rubble. "Max, find exit," Sarah commanded. The dog's enhanced sensors cut through the smoke and chaos. He led them toward a secondary exit, a window that had been blown out by the explosion. Sarah looked out and saw a fire escape 3 feet below the window frame. Not ideal, but survivable. "We're going out this way," Sarah told Taylor. "Trust me and follow exactly what I do." She helped the woman onto the fire escape, then commanded Max to jump down. The Belgian Malinois landed perfectly, his training evident even in crisis. Sarah followed, feeling the fire escape groan under their combined weight. They descended rapidly as more explosions echoed from above, secondary charges designed to bring down the entire floor. Volkov had booby-trapped the office, ensuring that anyone who found his command center wouldn't live to share what they'd learned. Sarah reached the ground level and pulled Taylor away from the building just as the 7th floor collapsed inward with a roar of concrete and steel. Smoke billowed into the Atlanta sky. Alarms screamed. People poured from neighboring buildings in panic. Sarah guided Taylor to a safe distance, then checked her for serious injuries. The head wound looked worse than it was. Superficial bleeding, no signs of concussion. The woman would survive. "Thank you," Taylor gasped, clutching Sarah's arm. "You saved my life. Who are you?" "Just someone in the right place at the right time," Sarah said, pulling out her MI6 credentials. "I'm a federal agent. Stay here. Emergency services will be here in minutes." Sarah moved away before Taylor could ask more questions. Max followed close at her heels, both of them covered in dust and debris, but unharmed. Around them, Atlanta's emergency response was mobilizing. Fire trucks, ambulances, police vehicles converging on the scene. Sarah activated her comms. "Control, I'm clear. Minimal injuries. But Volkov knew I was coming. He abandoned the location and rigged it with explosives specifically to eliminate whoever traced him there." "The transmitter you found was a trap," M said quietly. "The signal was designed to draw you in while Volkov escaped. Morrison must have warned him you'd trace the communications." Sarah felt rage building beneath her professional exterior. Volkov was always ahead, always anticipating. Always one step faster. It was like fighting smoke. Every time she reached for him, he slipped away. But smoke could be trapped. Predators could be hunted. And Sarah Collins hadn't become 007 by accepting defeat. "Control, pull everything we have on the convention center's security layout. Every access point, every restricted area, every possible entry route. If I can't find Volkov before he moves the bomb, I'll be waiting for him when he arrives." 07. That's suicide. You'll be one agent against Volkov's entire team, in a building filled with security personnel, world leaders, and thousands of civilians. The variables are impossible. "Then I'll make them possible," Sarah said flatly. "Because that's what 07 does. We don't accept impossible. We overcome it." M was silent for a moment, then her voice returned with quiet steel. "Understood. Sending you everything we have. But Sarah, you're right about one thing. This is what 007 does. And I chose you for this designation because I knew you could do it. Don't prove me wrong." "Not planning to, ma'am." Collins out. Sarah walked away from the collapsed building, Max at her side. Around them, Atlanta continued its morning routines, oblivious to how close they'd just come to another terrorist attack, unaware of the deadly game being played in their midst. Tomorrow afternoon, the Global Leadership Summit would begin. 20 heads of state would gather in one location. And somewhere in this city, Konstantin Volkov was preparing to deploy a weapon that would kill them all. But he hadn't counted on the new 007. He hadn't counted on a woman who'd spent her life protecting this city. He hadn't counted on a partner like Max, whose loyalty and skill made them an unstoppable team. Volkov had made a mistake. He'd assumed the new 07 would be like the old ones, predictable, conventional, bound by protocol. He didn't know Sarah Collins. Didn't know what she was capable of when everything was on the line. Tomorrow he would learn, and in learning, he would lose. The Georgia World Congress Center loomed against the Atlanta skyline like a fortress of glass and steel. Sarah Collins stood 3 blocks away, studying the massive complex through binoculars from the rooftop of a parking garage. The opening ceremony was now just 8 hours away, and the security presence was overwhelming. Secret Service, FBI, local police, private contractors, military personnel in unmarked vehicles. It should have been impenetrable, but Sarah knew better. Every fortress had weaknesses, every security protocol had gaps, and the Syndicate had spent 2 years finding them. Max sat beside her, his enhanced sensors providing a comprehensive scan of the convention center's perimeter. Through her smart glasses, Sarah watched the thermal feed, hundreds of heat signatures moving through the building, security teams conducting final sweeps, catering staff preparing for the summit's elaborate opening reception. Somewhere in that chaos, a dirty bomb was being moved into position, and Konstantin Volkov was orchestrating every move. Sarah's earpiece crackled. 007, this is Control. I'm uploading the final security assessment. It's not encouraging. M's voice carried a weight Sarah hadn't heard before, the burden of knowing that failure meant catastrophic loss of life. Sarah pulled up the data on her tablet as it streamed in from MI6 headquarters. The security layout was brutally efficient. Every entrance had biometric scanners, explosive detection systems, and armed personnel. The interior was divided into security zones, each requiring progressively higher clearance levels. The main auditorium, where the opening ceremony would take place, was effectively a vault with only 2 access points, both monitored by Secret Service counter-assault teams. "How is Volkov planning to get the device inside?" Sarah asked, already knowing the answer would be complicated. "That's what concerns us," M replied. "We've analyzed every legitimate entry vector, and none of them work. The radiation detection systems are too sophisticated, the security screening too thorough. Even with Morrison's insider knowledge, physically moving a 40-kilogram device through those checkpoints is impossible, unless they don't move it through the checkpoints," Sarah said slowly, her tactical mind working through alternatives. "What if the device is already inside?" There was a pause. Then M's voice returned with barely controlled alarm. "Explain." "The convention center has been preparing for this summit for months. Staging equipment, installing temporary infrastructure, setting up communications networks. What if the Syndicate smuggled the device inside weeks ago, disguised as legitimate equipment? They wouldn't need to bypass current security. They'd have bypassed it before security was fully established." "Dear God," M breathed. "That would mean the bomb has been sitting inside the building for potentially weeks, waiting for activation." Sarah felt the pieces clicking into place. Morrison had access to security installation schedules. He'd know exactly when and where equipment was being staged. The Syndicate could have delivered the device disguised as audio-visual equipment, stored it in a utility room or maintenance area, and left it dormant until today, which means it could be anywhere in the building, M said grimly. "We'd need to sweep every square foot, thousands of square meters, in less than 8 hours. It's impossible." "Then we don't search randomly," Sarah countered. "We think tactically. Where would Volkov position the device for maximum impact, not just to kill people in the auditorium, but to contaminate the entire building, ensure maximum casualties and maximum psychological terror?" Sarah pulled up architectural plans of the convention center, overlaying them with airflow diagrams and structural analysis. Her years as a cop had taught her to think like criminals. Now she needed to think like a terrorist. "The HVAC system," Sarah said suddenly. "If they positioned the device near the main air handling units, the radioactive material would be distributed throughout the entire building via the ventilation system. Everyone inside would be exposed. Attendees, security personnel, support staff. Thousands of people contaminated within minutes." "The main mechanical room is in the basement level," M confirmed, pulling up the same diagrams. "It's a restricted area, but maintenance personnel have regular access. If Morrison provided credentials and access codes, that's where it is," Sarah said with certainty. "That's where Volkov will go to activate it. Even if you're right, accessing that area requires biometric clearance that you don't have. And if you're wrong, you'll have wasted critical time searching the wrong location." Sarah stood, decision made. "I'm not wrong. Every instinct I have says that's the target zone. I'm going in." "How?" M asked. "You can't breach the security perimeter without causing an incident that would alert everyone, including Volkov." Sarah smiled grimly. "I'm not going to breach it. I'm going to walk through the front door." For the next hour, Sarah executed a plan that relied on timing, misdirection, and calculated audacity. She drove to a commercial uniform supply store and purchased clothing identical to what the convention center's maintenance staff wore. Dark blue work shirt with company logo, matching pants, tool belt. With her hair pulled back and minimal makeup, she looked completely unremarkable. Max's tactical vest was replaced with a standard service dog vest, identifying him as an emotional support animal. Sarah forged credentials, identifying her as Jennifer Walsh. HVAC technician with specialized clearance for mechanical systems. The credentials wouldn't survive deep verification, but they'd pass a quick scan at security checkpoints. At 10 hours, Sarah approached the convention center's service entrance. A line of catering trucks and equipment vans were being processed through security, the last wave of preparations before the ceremony. Sarah joined a group of legitimate maintenance workers, blending into their conversation about last-minute equipment checks and overtime pay. The security checkpoint was rigorous. Sarah placed her tool belt on the scanning conveyor, walked through the biometric scanner, allowed the guard to examine her credentials. Her Walther PPK had been left behind, too risky to carry through security. Instead, she carried only her tablet, encrypted earpiece, and a small multi-tool that could pass as legitimate equipment. The guard studied her credentials for a long moment. Sarah kept her expression neutral, professional, slightly bored, the look of someone who'd been through this checkpoint a dozen times before. "Ms. Walsh, what's your purpose today?" the guard asked. "Final inspection of the basement HVAC units," Sarah replied with practiced ease. "We've had intermittent sensor readings all week. Need to verify everything's working before the ceremony starts. Last thing anyone wants is the air conditioning failing with 20 heads of state in the building." The guard smiled slightly. "True enough. Your dog, emotional support animal," Sarah interrupted. "Certified through the ADA. I have all the documentation if you need to see it." The guard waved her through. "That's fine, but keep him away from the food preparation areas. Health code violations will get you thrown out faster than a security breach." Sarah thanked the guard and walked into the convention center with Max at her side. She was inside. Now came the hard part, finding the device before Volkov activated it. The basement level was accessed through a service elevator near the loading docks. Sarah descended alone, Max's enhanced sensors scanning for threats. The elevator opened onto a utilitarian corridor. Concrete walls, fluorescent lighting, the hum of mechanical systems vibrating through the structure. Sarah consulted her tablet, overlaying the architectural plans with her current location. The main mechanical room was 60 meters ahead, past several smaller equipment rooms and storage areas. She moved carefully, maintaining the casual pace of a technician conducting routine inspections. Other maintenance workers passed her in the corridors, none giving her a second glance. The disguise was working. The mechanical room's entrance was secured by an electronic keypad. Sarah pulled out her tablet and ran Morrison's old access codes, seized from his abandoned apartment. The first 2 codes failed. On the third attempt, the lock clicked open. Sarah entered the mechanical room and felt her breath catch. The space was enormous, a vast chamber filled with massive air handling units, water pipes, electrical conduits, and industrial equipment. The sound was overwhelming. Motors, fans, pumps, all operating at high capacity to support the building above. And somewhere in this mechanical maze, a dirty bomb was waiting. "Control, I'm in the mechanical room," Sarah said quietly into her comms. "Beginning search now." "Copy, 007. Be advised, security logs show regular maintenance patrols in that area. You'll have company eventually." Sarah moved through the mechanical room methodically, checking each section, each piece of equipment. Max's radiation sensors were active, scanning for the telltale signature of shielded radioactive material. Minutes passed with agonizing slowness. Then Max stopped, his body language shifting to full alert. Sarah followed his focus to a large air-handling unit in the far corner of the room. Unlike the other equipment, this unit had a locked access panel, unusual for machinery that maintenance crews needed to service regularly. Sarah approached carefully and examined the panel. Recent scratches around the lock suggested it had been opened and closed repeatedly. She pulled out her multi-tool and worked the lock, a simple mechanism that took less than 30 seconds to defeat. The panel swung open, and Sarah found herself staring at the device. It was exactly as Petrov had described, disguised as professional audio equipment, but the weight and construction were all wrong. Sarah ran a quick radiation scan with her tablet. The readings were unmistakable. This was the real weapon. "Control, I have it. Confirmed location. The device is positioned directly adjacent to the main air intake. If it detonates, the entire building becomes contaminated within minutes. Outstanding work, 07. M's voice carried profound relief. I'm alerting the bomb disposal team now. They can be on site in 15 minutes. Negative, Sarah interrupted, leaning closer to examine the device. It's activated. I'm seeing a digital timer. We have 73 minutes until detonation. The relief in M's voice transformed instantly to ice-cold focus. Can you disarm it? Sarah studied the device carefully. Petrov's technical specifications had included disarm procedures, but he'd warned that the Syndicate might have modified the design. 2 wires were visible, one red, one blue, connected to what appeared to be the detonation mechanism. But there was also a cellular data module suggesting remote activation capability. The device has been modified, Sarah said. There's a remote trigger. Even if I disarm the timer, Volkov could detonate it manually if he knows it's been discovered. Then what do you propose? M asked. Sarah made a decision that went against every safety protocol in the intelligence handbook. I'm moving it. Same strategy as before. Take it somewhere isolated where it can't hurt anyone. 07, you barely survived moving the decoy device. This is the real weapon. If the anti-tamper mechanisms engage, then I die, and so does Max. But thousands of innocent people live, Sarah said flatly. That's the job, Control. That's what 07 means. M was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was thick with emotion. Permission granted. God be with you, Sarah. Sarah carefully disconnected the device from the air handling unit, her hand steady despite the fear coursing through her system. The device was heavy, exactly 40 kilograms as Petrov had specified. Sarah couldn't carry it alone. She looked at Max, who met her gaze with absolute trust. Okay, buddy, we're going to need to work together on this one. Sarah fashioned a makeshift harness from her tool belt and attached it to Max's tactical vest. Together, they could distribute the weight, Sarah carrying most of it, Max providing stability and balance. It was awkward and slow, but it worked. They exited the mechanical room and moved toward the service elevator. Sarah's entire focus was on keeping the device stable, preventing any sudden movements that might trigger the anti-tamper mechanisms. Every step felt like it might be her last. The elevator arrived, and Sarah breathed a sigh of relief when the doors opened to reveal it empty. She and Max entered, and Sarah pressed the button for the loading dock level. As the elevator ascended, she checked the timer. 68 minutes remaining. The doors opened onto chaos. Security personnel were running through the corridors, shouting into radios. Alarms were sounding. Sarah's stomach dropped as she realized what had happened. Someone had discovered she wasn't a legitimate maintenance worker. The security breach had been flagged. A Secret Service agent spotted her. You! Stop right there! Drop what you're carrying and put your hands up! Sarah did the mental calculation in milliseconds. She could try to explain, try to convince them she was MI6 and the device in her arms was a bomb, but that would take time they didn't have. And if Volkov had people monitoring security communications, he'd know the device had been discovered. Sarah ran. Stop! Federal agent! Stop, or I will shoot! Sarah sprinted toward the loading dock exit, Max matching her pace. The device in her arms felt impossibly heavy, every step threatening to destabilize it. Behind her, she heard the pursuit. Multiple agents, weapons drawn, converging on her position. The loading dock was ahead. Sarah burst through the doors into bright sunlight. Her van was parked 3 blocks away, too far to reach on foot, while carrying the device and evading federal agents. She needed a vehicle. Now. A catering truck was idling near the loading dock, driver inside completing paperwork. Sarah made a decision that would haunt her later. She pulled the driver from the truck, shouted, "Federal emergency," and climbed behind the wheel with Max and the bomb. The truck lurched forward as Sarah floored the accelerator. In the rearview mirror, she saw Secret Service vehicles mobilizing, beginning pursuit. This was officially a federal incident now. Every law enforcement agency in Atlanta would be hunting for her. "Control!" Sarah shouted into her comms while weaving through downtown traffic. "I have the device, but I'm being pursued by Secret Service. They think I'm a terrorist. I need you to contact them immediately and explain." "We're trying." M's voice was strained. "But going through channels takes time. Where are you heading?" "Same quarry as before. It's the only isolated location I know. ETA 20 minutes if I don't get arrested first." Sarah drove with controlled aggression, using her knowledge of Atlanta's streets to stay ahead of pursuit. The catering truck was sluggish and obvious, but the mid-morning traffic provided some cover. Behind her, Secret Service vehicles were coordinating. She could hear the helicopters overhead, could see police cars moving to cut off intersections ahead. Max sat in the passenger seat with the device secured between them, his presence somehow calming despite the chaos. Sarah reached over briefly to touch his head. "Almost done, buddy. Just hold on a little longer." The timer showed 53 minutes remaining. Sarah had to reach the quarry, deploy the device, and evacuate before detonation. The math was tight but possible. A police roadblock appeared ahead, 3 cruisers blocking the intersection. Sarah couldn't stop, couldn't slow down. She spun the wheel hard, taking the truck onto a side street, the device sliding dangerously before Sarah stabilized it. 07, Secret Service is coordinating with FBI and local police, M reported. They're treating this as an active terrorist situation. They have authorization to use lethal force. Understood, Sarah said grimly. She didn't blame them. From their perspective, an unknown woman had breached security at a global summit, stolen something from the building, and was now fleeing in a vehicle. They were doing their jobs, protecting lives, following protocol. Sarah was just trying to do the same thing, but from the other side of a massive misunderstanding that could get her killed. The quarry appeared ahead after 18 agonizing minutes of evasion. Sarah crashed through the chain-link fence, the same fence she'd cut during her earlier visit, and drove the catering truck down the access road toward the pit. Pursuit vehicles were seconds behind her, helicopters overhead, no time for subtlety. Sarah stopped the truck at the quarry's edge, grabbed the device, and ran toward the pit. Max was beside her, matching her desperate pace. Behind them, law enforcement vehicles screeched to a stop, voices shouting commands, weapons being drawn. "Drop the device and get on the ground, now!" Sarah reached the edge of the pit and looked down at the dark water 200 feet below. The timer showed 47 minutes, enough time for bomb disposal if they could get the device safely into the water. But the Secret Service didn't know that. They saw a woman with what appeared to be a bomb standing at the edge of a quarry. The tactical situation was clear. She was either going to jump or detonate. Sarah activated her comms one final time. "Control, tell them to stand down. I'm deploying the device into the water. Tell them I'm MI6. "They know," M shouted back. "We got through to their command. They're standing down." The shouted commands behind Sarah changed tone. "Agent Collins, we've been advised of your status. Step away from the edge." Sarah turned, seeing a dozen weapons still trained on her, but fingers no longer on triggers. A Secret Service supervisor was approaching cautiously, hands visible. "Agent Collins, I'm Special Agent Martinez. We've confirmed your identity with MI6 London. You're not under arrest, but we need you to step away from that device and let our disposal team handle it." Sarah shook her head. "No time. The device is on a timer and has remote detonation capability. If Volkov realizes I have it, he could trigger it before your team gets it secured. We need it in the water now." Martinez processed this. "How long on the timer?" 45 minutes, enough for disposal, but only if we move fast." Martinez made a decision. He turned to his team. "Get the bomb disposal unit here immediately. Full hazmat protocols. Move." Sarah carefully carried the device to the very edge of the quarry, positioning it on a relatively flat section of rock. Max stayed close, his training keeping him calm despite the chaos. Together, they'd come through another impossible situation. The bomb disposal team arrived within 8 minutes, a small miracle of coordination and emergency response. Sarah briefed them on Petrov's specifications, the modifications she'd observed, the remote detonation risk. They worked with impressive efficiency, using a robotic crane to carefully lower the device into the quarry water. When the device was fully submerged, radiation shielded by 200 feet of water and effectively impossible to detonate remotely, Sarah finally allowed herself to breathe. 007, status. M's voice in her earpiece carried exhausted relief. Device is secure. Threat neutralized. We did it, Control. You did it, M corrected. You and that remarkable dog. I'm putting you in for a commendation, though knowing you, you'll probably prefer a quiet pint and a nap. Sarah smiled despite her exhaustion. The nap sounds good. The pint can wait until Volkov is in custody. About that, M's tone shifted. We've been analyzing the device's cellular module while disposal was in progress. We managed to extract the communication logs before submersion. Volkov was monitoring the device remotely from a location in Atlanta. We have coordinates. Sarah felt adrenaline surge again. Send them to me. 007, you've been operating continuously for over 30 hours. You're exhausted. You've been exposed to potential trauma. I need to finish this, Sarah interrupted. Volkov is still out there. The summit is still at risk. Send me the coordinates, Control. M sighed, but the data streamed to Sarah's tablet. An address in an upscale neighborhood north of downtown. Residential area, low profile, exactly the kind of place a professional like Volkov would use as a final fallback position. FBI is mobilizing a tactical team, M said. ETA 40 minutes. I'll be there in 20, Sarah replied, already moving toward one of the Secret Service vehicles. Special Agent Martinez was coordinating with his team, but he noticed Sarah's trajectory and intercepted her. Agent Collins, where do you think you're going? To finish the job, Sarah said simply. The man who planned this attack, Konstantin Volkov. We have his location. I'm going to bring him in. Martinez studied her for a moment, then made a decision that technically violated about 15 different protocols. You'll need backup, and probably a vehicle, since yours is evidence now. Take our SUV. I'm coming with you. Sarah was too tired to argue, and honestly, having backup sounded good right now. Let's go. The drive to Volkov's location took 18 minutes. Martinez drove while Sarah studied the tactical situation. The address was a 2-story house in a quiet neighborhood, perfect for blending in, terrible for conducting surveillance without being noticed. We go in quiet, Sarah said. If Volkov realizes we're coming, he'll either run or trigger whatever contingency he has left. We need him alive for interrogation. Martinez nodded, checking his weapon. Your operation, your call. I'm here as support. They parked 3 houses away and approached on foot. Max's sensors were active, scanning the house for heat signatures and electronic signals. The feed showed 2 people inside, one on the ground floor, one upstairs. Sarah drew her weapon. She'd reclaimed her Walter from the safe house during the drive. Martinez flanked right while Sarah moved to the front entrance. Max stayed with Sarah, ready to engage on her command. The front door was unlocked. Arrogant confidence or another trap? Sarah entered cautiously, weapon tracking for targets. The interior was furnished but impersonal. A safe house, not a home. She heard voices from upstairs. Russian, speaking quickly. Sarah ascended the stairs, each step carefully placed to avoid sound. Max followed like a shadow. The voices were coming from a bedroom. Sarah reached the door and paused, listening. 2 male voices, one giving orders, one responding. She recognized neither, but instinct told her one was Volkov. Sarah kicked the door open and entered in one smooth motion, weapon raised. Don't move, hands where I can see them. 2 men were in the room. The first was young, maybe mid-20s, clearly a subordinate. He froze, hands coming up slowly. The second man, scarred face, cold grey eyes, military bearing, turned to face Sarah with a slight smile. Konstantin Volkov in person. Agent Collins, Volkov said in accented English. The famous new 007. I've been looking forward to meeting you. Hands up, now. Sarah's weapon never wavered from Volkov's center mass. Volkov raised his hands slowly, still smiling. You've won today. The device is neutralized. The summit is safe. Congratulations, but this isn't over, Agent Collins. The Syndicate doesn't end with me. We are everywhere. In your agencies, your governments, your security services. You've found Morrison, but there are others. Always others. Then I'll find them too, Sarah said. Now get on the ground, face down, hands behind your head. Volkov complied, but his smile never faded. You're good, Agent Collins. Better than I expected. Better than Bond, perhaps. But even 007 can't win every battle, remember that. Martinez entered the room, securing the younger operative while Sarah kept Volkov covered. Within minutes, FBI tactical teams arrived to take custody of both prisoners. Volkov was led away in handcuffs, still smiling that cold, knowing smile. Sarah stood in the empty bedroom, watching through the window as Volkov was loaded into a federal vehicle. Max pressed against her leg, and she reached down to scratch behind his ears. "We did it, Max," she said quietly. "We actually did it." Her earpiece activated. 007, this is Control. Volkov is in custody, the device is secured, and the summit opening ceremony is proceeding as scheduled. You've prevented what could have been the worst terrorist attack in modern history. How do you feel? Sarah considered the question. She felt exhausted, sore, emotionally drained, and deeply uncertain about what came next. But she also felt something else. Pride. She'd proven herself worthy of the 007 designation. She'd saved countless lives. She'd protected her city and served her country with everything she had. "I feel like I need about 3 days of sleep and a very long conversation with Max about hazard pay," Sarah finally said. M laughed, a genuine warm sound that Sarah had never heard before. "Both can be arranged. Come home, 007. Come home." Sarah Collins walked out of the safe house into the Atlanta afternoon. The city continued its rhythms around her. Traffic moving, people going about their lives completely unaware of how close they'd come to disaster. That was the burden of being 007, saving the world in secret, protecting people who would never know your name. But Sarah Collins didn't need recognition or glory. She'd spent her career as a cop protecting people anonymously. This was just a larger scale of the same mission. She climbed into Martinez's SUV with Max, and they drove through Atlanta toward the convention center. In the distance, she could see security helicopters circling the building. The summit was happening. Leaders were gathering, and thanks to one determined agent and her remarkable dog, they'd all lived to see another day. Sarah's phone buzzed with an encrypted message from M. Preliminary analysis of Volkov's safe house yielded intelligence on Syndicate operations worldwide. Your actions today have dealt them a devastating blow. Well done, 007. Sarah allowed herself a small smile. Not bad for her first major mission as 007. Not bad at all. But Volkov's words echoed in her mind. The Syndicate doesn't end with me. We are everywhere. The battle was won. But the war continued. There would be other missions, other threats, other impossible situations requiring impossible courage. Sarah Collins was ready for them all, because she was 007. And together with Max, she was unstoppable. 3 weeks after the attempted attack on the Global Leadership Summit, Sarah Collins stood in the observation room of a secure MI6 facility in the English countryside. Through reinforced glass, she watched Konstantin Volkov sitting calmly in an interrogation chair, his scarred face betraying no emotion despite weeks of intensive questioning. He'd revealed nothing about the Syndicate's larger network, nothing about other operatives, nothing that could help MI6 dismantle the organization that had nearly succeeded in killing 20 world leaders. M stood beside Sarah, her expression reflecting the frustration they all felt. He's a professional. He knows that silence is his only leverage now. As long as the Syndicate believes he might still be useful, they won't move to eliminate him. And as long as he stays silent, we can't find the others, Sarah said quietly. Morrison is dead, killed himself in custody before he could be properly interrogated. Volkov won't talk. We're at a dead end. Max lay at Sarah's feet, his presence comforting even in the sterile environment of the interrogation facility. The Belgian Malinois had received a formal commendation from MI6, an unprecedented honor for an animal. Sarah had received her own recognition, though the ceremony had been classified and attended by fewer than a dozen people. Saving the world, it turned out, was a remarkably private affair. M's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, and her expression shifted from frustration to sharp focus. "We have a situation. Conference room. Now." Sarah followed M through the facility's secure corridors, Max padding alongside. The conference room was already filling with MI6's senior leadership, section chiefs, intelligence analysts, technical specialists. Whatever was happening, it was significant. M activated the main display screen, showing satellite imagery of a compound in Eastern Europe. 2 hours ago, CIA intercepted communications indicating that the Syndicate is planning retaliation for Volkov's capture. They're targeting the MI6 officers who were involved in the Atlanta operation. Sarah felt her blood run cold. How many officers are we talking about? Approximately 30 personnel had direct knowledge of Operation Stargazing, M replied. Most are already under protective custody, but there's a complication. Q. Amelia Chen was conducting field research in Prague when the threat was identified. She missed the extraction window. The Syndicate has her location. Sarah remembered Q, the brilliant young woman who designed Max's tactical equipment, who'd been instrumental in breaking the Syndicate's encryption protocols. If the Syndicate captured her, they'd have access to MI6's most sensitive technical capabilities. "What's her current status?" Sarah asked. "She's barricaded in a safe house, but Syndicate operatives are closing in. Local assets are compromised. We believe the Syndicate has infiltrated Czech intelligence. Q has maybe 2 hours before they breach her position. Then we extract her," Sarah said simply. "Fast insertion, grab Q, get out before the Syndicate can respond." M shook her head. "It's not that simple. The safe house is in the center of Prague, surrounded by civilians. Any military operation would be visible and politically catastrophic. And we have reason to believe the Syndicate has prepared for exactly this scenario. They want us to attempt a rescue. They're planning an ambush. So we do nothing." Sarah felt anger rising. "We just abandon Q to the Syndicate." "No," M said firmly. "We send someone they won't expect. Someone who's proven capable of operating independently in hostile environments. Someone with a very special partner." Sarah met M's gaze and understood. "You're sending me. You and Max, alone. No backup, no support, no safety net. Just like Atlanta. Can you do it?" Sarah looked down at Max, who met her eyes with absolute trust. They'd faced impossible odds before and won. This would be no different. "When do I leave?" 6 hours later, Sarah was on a private jet crossing European airspace. She'd been briefed during the flight, detailed intelligence on the Syndicate's Prague operations, technical specifications for Q's safe house, extraction routes through the city. The mission parameters were brutally simple. Get Q out alive. Avoid civilian casualties. Don't start an international incident. Easy, Sarah thought with grim humor. Just another day for 007. The plane landed at a private airfield outside Prague. A vehicle was waiting. Nondescript sedan with Czech plates and a concealed weapons cache in the trunk. Sarah changed into civilian clothes that would blend with Prague's late-night crowd. Dark jeans, leather jacket, boots. Max wore his tactical vest, the advanced equipment hidden beneath a service dog covering. The drive into Prague took 30 minutes. The city was beautiful at night. Medieval architecture illuminated by modern lighting. The Vltava River reflecting the glow of bridges and buildings. Tourists and locals filled the streets, enjoying the warm evening. None of them knew that somewhere in this city, a deadly game was being played. Sarah parked 3 blocks from Q's safe house and conducted a reconnaissance approach on foot. Through her smart glasses, she accessed the surveillance feeds Max was providing. Thermal imaging, showing multiple heat signatures surrounding the safe house. At least 8 hostiles, positioned in a perimeter pattern. Professional deployment. They were waiting for a rescue attempt, Sarah activated her encrypted comms. Control, I have visual confirmation on hostile positions. Minimum 8 operatives, possibly more inside nearby buildings. They're ready for us. M's voice came through clearly despite the distance. Can you bypass them? Not without being spotted. They've got overlapping fields of fire and good sight lines. Any approach will be detected. Then what do you propose? Sarah studied the tactical situation, her mind working through options. A direct assault was suicide. Stealth approach was impossible with this level of surveillance. She needed something unexpected, something the Syndicate wouldn't anticipate. I'm going to give them exactly what they expect, Sarah said slowly, and then do the opposite. She returned to the sedan and retrieved specific items from the weapons cache: flashbang grenades, smoke canisters, and a small remote-controlled drone, no larger than a hummingbird. Q had designed this particular toy, and Sarah was about to test it in the field. Sarah positioned herself in an alley with a clear view of the safe house. She launched the drone, guiding it through the air toward the hostile positions. The device was nearly silent, its small size making it almost invisible in the darkness. The drone reached the first hostile, a man positioned on a rooftop with a sniper rifle. Sarah activated the drone's payload, a concentrated burst of tear gas delivered directly to his face. The man gasped, stumbled backward, his weapon clattering as he clawed at his burning eyes. Sarah moved immediately, using the distraction to advance on the safe house. Max was beside her, his enhanced senses tracking the other hostiles. The drone continued its work, systematically disabling perimeter guards with precision gas bursts. But Sarah knew this was only buying time. The moment the Syndicate realized their perimeter was compromised, they'd call for reinforcements. She had maybe 3 minutes before the situation escalated beyond control. Sarah reached the safe house entrance and worked the lock with practiced efficiency. Inside, she found Q huddled in a fortified interior room, laptop open, desperately trying to coordinate her own escape. Q, it's Collins. We're leaving, now. Amelia Chen looked up with profound relief. Thank God. They've been probing the building's defenses for the past hour. I didn't think anyone could get through their perimeter. They expected a tactical team. They got one agent with a very clever dog and some of your own technology. Now come on, we have about 90 seconds before this place becomes a war zone. They exited through the rear entrance, Sarah's weapon tracking for threats. Max led the way, his sensors painting a clear picture of hostile positions. 3 operatives were converging on their location, weapons drawn. Sarah pulled Q into a doorway as bullets chipped the stone beside them. She returned fire, 3 controlled shots that forced the hostiles to take cover. Then she threw a flashbang grenade, the blinding explosion giving them seconds to move. They ran through Prague's narrow streets, Max leading them along a route that avoided the main hostile positions. But the Syndicate was adapting, reinforcements appearing from side streets and buildings. This was the ambush M had warned about. They'd let Sarah penetrate the perimeter, then plan to trap her during extraction. Control, I have Q, but we're boxed in, Sarah reported while running. At least 12 hostiles, probably more. Need an exit strategy. Head for the Charles Bridge, M instructed. We have a boat waiting on the river, ETA 4 minutes. 4 minutes through hostile territory while protecting a civilian and avoiding an international incident. Sarah had faced worse odds in Atlanta, but not by much. They burst onto a main street filled with tourists and nightlife. Sarah holstered her weapon, couldn't risk innocent casualties. The Syndicate operatives were forced to do the same, unwilling to cause a massacre that would bring Prague's entire police force down on them. But that advantage was temporary. Sarah spotted 2 operatives ahead, moving to cut off their route to the bridge. She needed a distraction, something that would let them slip past without a firefight in the middle of a crowd. Sarah spotted a street performer ahead, a musician with a loud sound system. She dropped a handful of euros in his case and shouted, "Play something loud." The performer obliged, cranking his speakers to maximum volume. The sudden blast of music startled the crowd, people turning to see what was happening. In that moment of confusion, Sarah pulled Q into a side alley, Max clearing the path ahead. They emerged near the Charles Bridge, the famous Gothic structure spanning the Vltava River. Tourists packed the pedestrian bridge, taking photos and enjoying the evening. Sarah pushed through the crowd, Q staying close, Max navigating with practiced ease. The boat was visible below, a sleek speedboat waiting at a riverside dock. So close, just had to reach it without the Syndicate catching up. Sarah heard shouting behind them, operatives pushing through the crowd. She risked a glance back and saw 4 men converging, no longer concerned with subtlety. They were going to make their move regardless of witnesses. Sarah reached the end of the bridge and looked down at the boat. The dock was accessible by stone stairs, descending from the bridge level. Steep, narrow, exposed. If the Syndicate caught them on those stairs, there'd be no escape. Q, when I say run, you run and don't look back, Sarah commanded. Get to that boat. Max will protect you. What about you? Q asked, fear evident in her voice. I'm 007. I'll be fine. Now run. Q ran down the stairs with Max beside her. Sarah turned to face the pursuing operatives, drawing her Walther. This was it, the moment where training and instinct collided with reality. 4 armed professionals against 1 agent in the middle of a tourist district. The first operative reached for his concealed weapon. Sarah was faster, a single shot to his shoulder that spun him around and sent his weapon clattering across the stone bridge. Tourists screamed and scattered. The remaining 3 operatives drew their weapons despite the witnesses. Sarah dove behind a stone pillar as bullets sparked off medieval stonework. She couldn't return fire without risking civilians. She needed another approach. Sarah pulled out her last flashbang grenade and threw it high, arcing over the crowd. The operatives tracked the grenade with their eyes, expecting it to land near them. Instead, it detonated in mid-air, a blinding flash that temporarily disabled their vision without harming civilians. Sarah ran for the stairs while they were blinded. She descended in a controlled fall, taking steps 3 at a time. Behind her, she heard the operatives recovering, beginning pursuit. Q and Max were already in the boat, the pilot preparing to cast off. Sarah hit the dock running and launched herself toward the boat. She landed hard in the stern as the pilot gunned the engine. The speedboat surged away from the dock, just as the operatives reached the riverside, weapons raised but unwilling to fire at a vessel already in international waters. Sarah lay in the bottom of the boat, breathing hard, adrenaline still coursing through her system. Q was safe. Max was safe. Mission accomplished. 07, excellent work. M's voice came through the earpiece. The boat will take you to a NATO airbase. From there, transport back to London. Congratulations on another successful operation. Thank you, Control, Sarah replied. But we both know this isn't over. The Syndicate will try again. Yes, M agreed quietly. They will, which is why Britain needs agents like you. Why the 007 program remains essential. The boat raced down the Vltava River, leaving Prague behind. Sarah sat up and checked on Q, who was shaking but unharmed. Max pressed against Sarah's leg, and she scratched behind his ears with familiar affection. That was insane, Q said, voice still trembling. You just walked into their trap and extracted me like it was a training exercise. It wasn't easy, Sarah admitted, but it's what we do. Protect our people, no matter the odds. James Bond used to say the same thing, Q said softly. I think you're exactly the right person to carry his number. Sarah felt the weight of those words. For weeks, she'd struggled with imposter syndrome, feeling like she didn't deserve the 007 designation, like she was just a cop playing at being a spy. But tonight had proven something important. She wasn't trying to be James Bond. She was Sarah Collins, and that was enough. The NATO airbase appeared ahead, military transports and support facilities illuminated in the darkness. The boat docked, and they were met by armed guards who escorted them to a waiting aircraft. Within an hour, they were airborne, heading back to Britain. Sarah slept during the flight, real sleep for the first time in weeks. When she woke, Max was curled beside her seat, and Q was working on a laptop across the aisle. "Sleep well?" Q asked, noticing Sarah was awake. "Better than I have in a while. What are you working on?" Q turned the laptop to show her. "Analyzing the data we collected during the Prague operation. The Syndicate operatives you neutralized. We recovered their communications devices. I've been breaking their encryption. Find anything useful?" "Maybe. There are references to someone called the Architect. Seems to be the Syndicate's operational leader. If we can identify them, we might be able to dismantle the entire organization." Sarah felt hope stirring. "How long until you crack the encryption fully?" "Days, maybe weeks, but we'll get there. And when we do, you'll be the first to know." The aircraft landed at RAF Bryce Norton in the pre-dawn darkness. Sarah and Max disembarked to find M waiting on the tarmac, an unprecedented gesture that spoke to the significance of what they'd accomplished. "Walk with me," M said, leading Sarah away from the aircraft. They walked along the edge of the runway, Max trotting beside them, as the sun began to rise over the Oxfordshire countryside. M was silent for a moment, gathering her thoughts. "When I selected you for the 007 designation," M finally said, "many people questioned the decision. A woman, an American, a police officer rather than military or intelligence background. They said you weren't ready, that the program should maintain its traditions, that I was taking an unnecessary risk." "I heard the whispers," Sarah admitted. "I'm sure you did, but I didn't choose you to prove a point or make a political statement. I chose you because I saw something in you that's become rare in modern intelligence work. Genuine courage combined with deep compassion. You don't just neutralize threats, Sarah. You protect people. That's what makes you extraordinary." Sarah felt emotion rising, but kept her voice steady. "Thank you, Ma'am. That means more than you know. You've exceeded every expectation," M continued. "Atlanta, Prague, and a dozen smaller operations in between. You've proven yourself worthy of the UR-7 designation beyond any doubt. But more than that, you've redefined what it means to carry that number. You've shown that 007 isn't about matching James Bond's style. It's about finding your own way to achieve the mission." They stopped at a vantage point overlooking the airbase. In the growing light, Sarah could see the beauty of the English countryside, rolling hills, ancient trees, the quiet dignity of a nation that had survived countless threats. "What happens now?" Sarah asked. "Now you continue the work. There will be other threats, other operations, other impossible situations. The Syndicate is wounded, but not destroyed. There are other organizations that threaten global security, Spectre, Quantum, groups we haven't even identified yet. The world needs 007, Sarah. It needs you and that remarkable dog of yours." Sarah looked down at Max, who sat patiently waiting for her next command. They'd been through so much together, Atlanta, Prague, and all the moments in between. He'd saved her life multiple times, had proven himself the perfect partner in every operation. "We'll be ready," Sarah said with quiet confidence. M smiled, a genuine expression of warmth and respect. "I know you will. Now go home, 007, get some rest. Spend time with Max. Enjoy the quiet while it lasts." "How long do you think the quiet will last?" "Knowing your luck? About 48 hours. They both laughed, the tension of weeks finally breaking. Sarah saluted, a gesture that felt right in this moment, and M returned it with equal gravity. Sarah walked back toward the transport vehicles, Max at her side. The sun was fully up now, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. It was going to be a beautiful day. Her phone buzzed with a message from Q. "Encryption breakthrough. We have a lead on the Architect. Call me when you're ready." Sarah smiled. M's estimate of 48 hours might have been optimistic. She looked down at Max. "Looks like the quiet didn't even last 48 minutes, buddy. You up for another mission?" Max's tail wagged enthusiastically, and Sarah laughed. Of course he was ready. They were 007. Stopping them would take more than the Syndicate, more than impossible odds, more than anything the world could throw at them. 1 month later, Sarah Collins sat in a safe house in Tokyo, preparing for her next operation. Max was beside her, his equipment maintained and ready, On her tablet, intelligence files detailed the architect's suspected location, a heavily fortified compound in Southeast Asia. The mission would be dangerous. The odds would be impossible. Success would require everything she'd learned as a cop, as an agent, as 007. But Sarah Collins had proven something important over the past months. She wasn't trying to be James Bond. She wasn't trying to live up to someone else's legacy. She was creating her own legend, one mission at a time, one saved life at a time, one impossible victory at a time. The phone rang. M's voice came through, professional and direct. "007, are you ready?" Sarah looked at Max, who met her gaze with absolute trust and loyalty. She thought about Atlanta, about Prague, about every mission they'd faced together. She thought about the people they'd saved, the threats they'd neutralized, the difference they'd made. "Yes, ma'am," Sarah said with quiet confidence. "We're ready." "Then good luck, 007. The world is counting on you." Sarah Collins stood, checking her weapon one final time. Max rose with her, his body language alert and ready. Together, they walked toward the door, toward whatever dangers awaited, toward the next impossible mission that would test their courage and skill. Because that's what 007 did. They faced the impossible and made it possible. They protected the innocent and punished the guilty. They stood between civilization and chaos, between peace and destruction. And Sarah Collins, the new 007, the first woman to carry that legendary designation, the agent with the remarkable K9 partner, had proven herself worthy of the legacy in every way that mattered. The door opened, and Sarah stepped into the Tokyo night with Max at her side. The mission was waiting. The world needed saving. And 007 was ready, always ready. The end,